This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian. I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
Look, some of us are lazy, alright?
If by lazy you mean wrong.
Prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide whether the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because guess what? This film is lit. It's the beginning of the end. It's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. As the intro stated, it is the beginning of the end. I believe that was also the tagline for this movie.
I think so.
Would make sense. Yeah. I believe it would fit very well, and I believe it was. This is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. Next week will be Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. There's not a in-between intro or prequel episode, which there normally is. We're skipping it and just going right into it. We got all the prequel out in the last episode. So back-to-back, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows to finish the series up for now.
Oh, it's been a journey.
It has been a journey. We mentioned we are going to do a special episode discussing some of the more problematic elements of Harry Potter. We'll see when that comes out. Sometime before Christmas is the plan, but that'll be a standalone episode. It doesn't fall into the normal rotation. After this, we're getting back in to all kinds of new stuff, all kinds of different stuff. And it'll be back to the normal format.
We haven't seen it yet, but from what I've been seeing online, it sounds like maybe we can wrap that into the Fantastic Beasts.
Apparently, Fantastic Beasts: Crimes of Grindelwald is not great.
Not so fantastic, is what I'm hearing.
That's the rumor, but we shall see. I still want to see it because I thought the first one was all right, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's getting very bad reviews in general, so. We're going to start our Harry Potter episode off, like we always do, with Muggle Questions.
Muggle.
Non-magic folk.
First things first, it's Trevor's birthday. Well, yesterday, if you're listening to this, when this episode drops on Tuesday, it was Trevor's birthday yesterday, so we wanted to wish him a very happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Trevor.
Yeah.
We hope your birthday is better than Harry Potter's birthdays.
Yeah, most of them are pretty bad. Although, I will say, his 11th birthday... pretty sweet.
Pretty good birthday present.
Found out he was a wizard. Hopefully.
I mean, look where that got him, though.
Fair enough. That was the beginning of a very dark path. But that in itself was probably a pretty sweet birthday.
True.
Especially in comparison to his previous 10 birthdays or so. 9 birthdays. All right, but let's get into Trevor's actual questions here and see what he has for us.
Brian, Katie, hello. Thank you again for having me on This Film is Lit, Harry Potter edition. We're getting down to it, guys. So in the beginning, everyone is worried about Voldemort. Do the humans know about Voldemort? Are they also worried? Or is that something that is kept secret from them?
We talked about this a little bit in the Half-Blood Prince episode, and Trevor did mention in a later question that he wrote these questions down before listening to our Half-Blood Prince episode. So he may not, there may be certain things he missed that we talked about. We talked about this a little bit. In Half-Blood Prince, the Ministry of Magic, the minister specifically of magic, informs and keeps the Muggle minister in the loop on kind of what's going on. Specifically in 6, he tells him about how Voldemort is back and is a problem and all these sort of things.
For important things, at least.
Yeah.
Anything that could be a safety issue, I guess.
Yeah, and I think from that we can assume that some of the higher-ups within the Muggle government are aware of what's going on. It's probably not just the minister, but, who knows how far that stretches to different, elements of the Muggle government. Yeah, but ordinary people know.
Yeah, just like the general population, I would assume not.
No, they don't. There's no mention of what they know, which is, in general, some Muggles are aware because, like, Hermione's parents are just
Sure,
Muggles,
yeah.
and so Muggle-born witches and wizards, their parents know, and who knows how far that stretches beyond them. If they're, the aunts and uncles might know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Did they tell her grandma?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. The books never really go into how far that sort of spreads out beyond that. I think generally we could assume, and I'm sure this has been talked about extra canonically, if not canonically, in terms of like what their rules are about telling people like that. Like, obviously Hermione's parents have to know, but are they allowed to tell their grandparents or, that sort of thing? I'm sure there are like rules that have
and we
been
know
discussed.
that wizards are very serious about their secrecy.
Yes.
In this series, so
yeah, they do take it, at least pretend to take it pretty seriously. There are all kinds of rules about doing magic in front of Muggles and all that sort of thing that we've learned about earlier in the books. But now, as it gets a little more, things get a little more crazy. It's not the rules aren't really enforced the same way.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, they don't. Most people don't know, but the government does know. But there's not really anything they can do, and that's kind of what Fudge / Scrimger, as we've now been found out from this movie, that's kind of what they tell the human minister. Like, there's
not really anything.
We're taking care of it. Like, what are they going to do?
We're doing the best we can.
We're doing what we can. Although I still want to know what happens if you shoot Voldemort with a gun. I mean, I feel like
I have a note about
we
that
should try it.
again
Yeah,
later.
I know. That's why I brought it up. I feel like you could give it a go. What's it going to hurt?
I felt like the movie did not properly explain the motivation or the reasoning behind Hermione taking away the memories from her parents. Did the book go into better detail about that?
So there is a little bit more explanation for this in the book. We get to see it in the movie, which is cool. But she modifies their memories. There's, like I said, more explanation in the book.
Yeah.
She basically like rewrites them
so that they don't realize they have a daughter.
Yeah,
they move to
new
Australia.
people.
They decide to move. She makes them decide to move to Australia and forget the fact that they have a daughter. She also clarifies that if this ever all gets sorted out, she'll go find them and reverse it. But the reason she does it is to hide them.
Yeah, so that Death Eaters can't like find them and try to torture them for information.
Yeah, so she gets them to move away, assume new identities essentially, and then keep them safe from Voldemort and the Death Eaters is the plan. And it works in the books. They never get found or anything like that we know of.
I was completely lost by the Mirror Shard. What was the Mirror Shard, and why does Harry keep seeing Dumbledore in it?
The Mirror Shard is, and this is, I think the movie cut this out. This is first in book 5, in the Order of the Phoenix. Mm-hmm. And it's probably in deleted scenes. I don't remember it in the movie unless I'm blanking on it.
I don't remember this being in the movie.
Sirius gives Harry a 2-way mirror, and Sirius has the other one. Yeah. And that shard is part of the mirror that Harry ends up breaking at the end of the 5th book, because after Sirius dies, he thinks, oh, the mirror, maybe somehow I'll still be able to talk to him, and like kind of just as a last-ditch effort. And then when it doesn't work, he gets mad and breaks it, or like throws it and it breaks. Mm-hmm. And it's in his trunk for the rest of the series. And then as he's packing his trunk at the beginning of this book, he finds the shard and is looking at it in his bedroom, which is kind of where we see it in the beginning of this movie is him. But in the book, he is cleaning up and packing up to leave and kind of stumbles across one of the shards.
Apparently he's never cleaned out his trunk.
He says he cleans it. He's described in the book, and I can kind of understand it for sort of a 16-year-old boy. He just scrapes off like the topmost layer of like clothes and swaps, clean. He never has like completely emptied his trunk so there's stuff in the bottom corners, little scraps of this and that he's never completely cleaned out, which I can buy for a 16-year-old kid who's never really had great parental figures that have explained how to, be hygiene and that sort of thing. We've discussed, or maybe we haven't, we've meant to discuss how little they shower in this series, because when he's going to his trial in Order of the Phoenix, Mrs. Weasley says, you need to wash your hair. Yeah. And I'm like, what? Before the trial tomorrow. And I'm like, was that, how long has it been? Like, I don't know. It just seemed weird to me. But anyways, so it's a mirror that he got from Sirius. And then as to what he sees in it, that's a spoiler.
Yeah, so we're going to leave that alone.
It will be answered in part 2.
Yeah.
Which Trevor has watched at this point, but we just don't have his questions for it. So we do, but obviously they're not in this
we're
one.
not answering
We're not
them
answering them yet, and I haven't listened to them. But that will be answered in part 2. All right, that's it for the first part of our Muggle questions. Let's get into Better in the Book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
So this is probably going to be our shorter on the as it goes in terms of Better in the Book, but also just in general. Mm-hmm. And one of the main reasons for that is this is a fairly faithful adaptation.
Yeah, it actually is.
Like I say fairly, not fairly, like a pretty incredibly faithful.
There's stuff they cut.
Yeah.
But
and there's stuff they change a little bit. But yeah, by and large, and a lot of it is incredibly faithful to what I sort of imagined. Now, part of that may be because at this point, when I'm reading this book, I have seen the movies,
right?
Like 5 of them, I think, by the time this book came out.
Yeah.
So maybe not, maybe even 6 of them. I can't remember exactly the time. We would have to look it up. But so I've seen it. So that probably informed a little bit of what I imagined reading, seeing the actors a little bit more than I maybe previously did, that sort of thing. But it's very faithful, and they don't cut a whole lot because they split it into 2 parts.
Yeah. So
they're able to include a lot more than they have been in previous books. So it's pretty faithful. So it's not as crazy of a diversion from the book, but we do have quite a bit to discuss. So
yeah, it's still our longest section.
It's still our longest section.
So first things first, literally everything with the Dursleys.
They cut, and now I've heard that this is in the deleted scenes. They filmed considerably more of this, and it just all hit the cutting room floor for the theatrical release. But we get nothing with them. Mm-hmm. He watches them leave.
Yeah, that's it.
And we don't even see, we see Vernon's face and we see Petunia's face. We don't even see Dudley's face. We just see him walking to the car. Mm-hmm. And the reason that kind of sucks is that in the book, there's a really interesting scene between Harry and the Dursleys as they're leaving.
Yeah,
they're being
Dudley actually gets some character growth.
Yeah, he does. And it's a little, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but because it's been sort of brewing since book 5.
Yeah.
But we haven't really seen it until all of a sudden right now we kind of get, like, there wasn't like a gradual, it was just like all of a sudden he's like now sort of cool with Harry. But they're leaving because the ministry's putting them into like witness protection, essentially.
Yeah, basically.
Like through the Ministry of Magic, that is. But as they're saying goodbye and they know like this is the last time they're going to see Harry, Dudley, somebody calls Harry a waste of space, probably Vernon, I assume. And Dudley says, I don't think he's a waste of space.
Yeah.
And then Harry, as he's leaving, tells him to take care of Big D, which is like Dudley's nickname. So there's a nice little moment. And they actually shake hands.
Yeah, it's a nice moment between them.
Yeah.
And another moment with Dudley, although we don't know it's Dudley at the time. He leaves a cup of tea outside Harry's room for him.
Harry comes out of his room and steps on and like crunches a teacup full of tea, and he assumes it was like the Dursleys leaving it. I don't remember what he thought it was, but he realizes later that it was Dudley. After his goodbye with Dudley, he goes, oh, that was actually probably Dudley leaving me tea because he was like locked in his room or whatever. So yeah, there's some sweet little moments there with the Dursleys, but that's all removed. Again, from what I've heard, was shot and is in the extended cut, or at least some version of it is in the extended cut. So, and then we jump right into Harry's removal from Privet Drive, where everybody shows up, the whole order basically, except for a couple of them, show up to escort Harry away from Privet Drive I guess he's not turning 17. That's still not till later, but just
right, 'cause he's leaving Privet Drive, which means he'll no longer consider that his home.
Yes,
and his aunt doesn't live there anymore, so that
as soon as he leaves,
protection,
the blood magic will
is
drop
running out. Yeah.
One of the things I thought is that we finally see Bill in the movies. This is the first time we see Bill in any of the movies. He arrives, and I do appreciate this. They had every single person who was there in the book as part of this group is there in the movie. Yeah. At least I'm pretty sure, unless I'm missing somebody. I believe
everybody was there.
Yeah, because they have all 7 of the other Harrys or all 6 of the other Harrys or whatever. And so, yeah, they're all there. So Bill finally shows up because he has to. He's been in almost not every book. Like since 4, he's been in like every book probably. Yeah. Maybe not 5 as much, but he was in 4, 6, and 7 for sure. He was in, and we'll talk about where he was at and what he was doing in 6 in a Muggle question, because Trevor was also confused about who is this new character, which we'll discuss. But he was attacked by Fenrir Greyback, and they mentioned that in the movie. But I always imagined him to be a little more scarred than he is in the film.
I imagined it, like, because the way they talk about it at the end of book 6, it sounds pretty gnarly.
Yeah, and now they talk about they did a fair amount of magic to kind of fix him up and that sort of thing, but it's still implied that he's rather disfigured on half of his face.
Yeah.
And he sort of just has a cool slash on his face in the movie. And, you know, I understand kind of probably why they did that, but at the same time, again, to me, it felt like one of those things where it would be striking and a reminder of how evil. And now they do it a lot better in this movie in terms of sort of showing us how truly evil the bad guys in this series are. Whereas a lot of the other times we don't get we don't see them being evil as much. Whereas we do get it quite a bit in this one. But I think that would have been one more thing to help drive it home as we see Bill, especially if it's the first time we see him, like, holy shit. Like, if it's half of his face is, like really messed up.
And I can understand not wanting to do that kind of makeup for, like, a 10-second
shot of him,
But I still think it would have been something... I don't want to say easy, because I know that applying makeup like that isn't easy, but something kind of relatively minor to do that would have been, like you said, it would have helped drive home the evil aspect. Yeah. And it also would have been like a nice nod for the fans. Yeah. Like, hey, we've cut him out of the last 3 movies. Yeah. Here's an actual thing.
Here's a thing that's true to the books is that, he got fucked up by Fenrir Greyback, but now he's just got a slash. Because he, like, gnawed on his face is the because he like, gnawed, and this is just, like, he got slashed is what it kind of looks like. And again, it's not a big deal. It's fine. At least they mentioned it and didn't, like, completely cut it out. But, yeah. And I think we've watched 13 seasons of Face Off. I think I could say that would be relatively it would not be that big of a deal to do, a pretty gnarly scar makeup for one scene. It wouldn't have been that big of a deal. They cut out a couple overall, we'll talk about it later, this whole scene's great, but they cut out a couple of lines I really liked, and they're callback lines to earlier in the series that one of those things that J.K. Rowling does really well, the call forwards and the call backwards. And one of them is that when they're taking the polyjuice potion in this scene, they put Harry into it, and it always changes color to whatever kind of match.
They put his hair in.
And every time we see polyjuice potion in the books, anytime you put the person's ingredient in, it changes colors. Yeah. And they put it into Harry's, and he turns like goldish, kind of. And they make a joke about how you look way tastier than Crabbe and Goyle, because when they turned into Crabbe and Goyle in
way back in book 2,
it turned like snot green and like
it looked like
brown or something
like that.
Yeah, like these 2 awful colors because they're awful people. And I thought that was a fun little callback. And then also, Fred and George have a callback to the very first time they're introduced, where when they both, because Fred and George both turn in to take the polyjuice potion to become Harry, and then somebody says something to him like, "Hey, Fred, do this," or "Hey," and they go, "I'm not Fred, I'm George. Can't you tell us apart?" or something like that. Which obviously the joke in the moment, they both look like Harry. Yeah. But that was their same joke they made when they were introduced at the train station.
When we first meet them, they make that joke.
To their mom or whatever, when she's trying to tell them apart. And that's in the first movie, I believe. Yeah, that I remember that from the movie. So I thought that would have been a good, quick little thing to have that call back to, But again, not a big deal.
And I don't think this was in the movie. I don't remember hearing it. Do you remember?
I don't remember either.
Yeah. I don't think this was in there, but in the book, Mad-Eye Moody has a line when they're going over this plan, and it's an ironic line, and we know that it's an ironic line. It's dramatic irony. Yeah. He says, "Is it
dramatic irony if some of the characters are aware?" I guess it is for him. It's dramatic irony for Moody.
Right, because he doesn't know. He doesn't know. But the reader knows.
Yeah, and Harry and Hermione and Ron
they know. Yeah. But he says, even you-know-who can't split himself into 7.
Yeah. Like, well, actually.
But he has.
Actually. Yeah. Yeah, I don't believe that was in the movie. I want to also, this is a good point to say it. As we're watching this movie, we're taking notes and we're going back and we're watching and taking notes. And sometimes we have to pause and take notes. So there's always going to be things we miss in the movie specifically. I mean, and in the book. The book's a little easier because it's easier to take notes while you're reading it because you can just stop.
And it's easier to like just flip back a page
and
look at something than to try to rewind
and find the part in the movie.
Yeah.
So with the movie, it's a little tough because we're taking notes, and it helps that there's two of us so that one of us hopefully catches everything. But there are things where it's like sometimes it's like, did they have that part in the movie? Especially if it's a little thing.
Yeah,
you're like, one line. I don't know.
Yeah, a little one-liner or something. You're thinking about it later, and you're like, shit, was that actually in there?
Yeah.
Did I miss it?
So there's chances that there's stuff like that is in it, or that whatever that we just missed. If so, we apologize. We're doing what we can here. Again, we'd have to watch the movie like 6 times and that's a lot. It was a way too much time investment, more than we can handle for this podcast. So I don't know if overall, I think I could see you have this in a later segment, and I don't disagree. I just think there's something really interesting about the way they do it in the book when Hedwig dies. In the book, Hedwig is in her cage and just gets hit with a killing curse and is dead.
Yeah.
There's no fanfare. There's no nothing. It just happens like immediately. And it's like brutal. And you're like, oh shit. And I think I understand what we're going to talk about later. And I don't disagree with why you have it in a different section. And I even agree with it in the sake of the movie, I think. In the book, I kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to say I like it, but I like it in the sense that it's just this brutal, like, holy shit reality check. Like, it instantly makes it clear the stakes of this book. And now you can say that even with the way they do it in the movie, but it just feels so brutal and cold in the book that I don't know. It like really puts you on edge. Like, oh shit, this is not going to be fun.
Yeah.
When the way Hedwig dies in the book.
Well, and yeah. That's in chapter 4, and I read the first 3 chapters and then I stopped. And I couldn't make myself pick the book back up for a couple days because this is a thing that one of the things that really gets me, because basically what J.K. Rowling did here was kill the dog.
Yeah, absolutely killed the dog.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
She killed the pet.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
Yeah.
And I understand it narratively.
I also understand it practically.
Yes,
of
I
not
understand
dragging
it
Hedwig
practically.
around with them everywhere they go.
Well, I don't know that they would have done that. Sure,
Yeah, maybe
they'd be
he could have left
smarter
Hedwig
than
with
that.
somebody or
But
whatever.
if Harry was smart, he would have sent Hedwig ahead like a week early. But
right. I meant when they were going everywhere after this.
No, I know.
Yeah, like it made sense to not have to deal with bringing an owl with you. Is what I just meant. I understood it from an ease of story writing point of not having to have Hedwig with them the whole time. And what are they doing with Hedwig? And if they're apparating in and out of places really fast, like what is Hedwig up to? Now you could write it away like he gives them to Jenny or something or whatever.
At the Weasleys.
Yeah, like sure, I get that, but
it's like, okay, we watched the movie Hush around Halloween.
Yeah.
So, Brian, what was I worried about the whole time?
They introduced
what was my main concern?
They introduce a cat very early, which Hush just very quickly is about a woman who lives alone, a deaf woman who lives alone in the woods, and she has a pet cat, an outdoor pet cat, and they introduce it very early because she feeds it or whatever, and then this killer shows up, and yes, the whole time you were worried and waiting for them to kill the cat.
Yeah, because if they had killed the cat, I was going to leave and not talk to you for the next 3 days. That's how that was going to go down.
Which I did remember. I couldn't remember whether or not they did, but I was erring on the side of they don't, which I was correct.
They did not,
Spoilers.
yes.
They don't kill the cat. If you want to watch that movie and you're worried about the cat dying, and cat does not die. So.
But the death of the pet is a trope that I have a particularly hard time handling for lots of reasons.
Right.
When I was rereading this book, this is probably the first time I've reread it, maybe since it came out.
Really, I've read it 2 or 3 times.
Because I didn't reread them a lot.
Yeah.
After that first time. But at any rate, the page in the book where Hedwig dies in my copy has tear stains on it.
Absolutely
So there's
does.
a fun fact for you guys.
It absolutely does. I don't know if that's a fun fact, but it's a fact. It absolutely does. You showed it to me. I was like, yep, there you go. I don't believe I cried when Hedwig died when I read this the first time, but I know I did at the end. Not at the end. At the end of this movie. At the end of this movie. Not at the end of the movie. At the end where this movie ends, that point of the book, I remember crying. But I don't know if I did with Hedwig or not. So. Oh, also Harry fucking blows Hedwig up in the book, which is I get why they didn't do that, but it is nuts, and I had completely forgotten about that. Because Hedwig is in the sidecar of the motorcycle, and in the book, the sidecar of the motorcycle falls off at one point, and Hedwig's in the cage down there, and as it falls past some Death Eaters, Harry shoots it with some spell that makes it explode. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And he has a thought in his head where he's like, sorry, Hedwig. And I'm like, fucking hell, man. I mean, he's already dead, but... Yeah. It was, it was wild.
And then everybody keeps asking him about Hedwig.
Yeah.
And I'm like, please, you guys.
Please stop.
Chill.
Yeah. A couple more things in this scene during the big chase with the Death Eaters at the beginning. They do a lot of cool stuff in the movie, but one thing they don't do, which I'm amazed they didn't, because it seems ready-made for a movie, is at one point he hits the button on the motorcycle, and one of the things they built into this motorcycle, along with the speed boost, is a magic brick wall that pops out of the back of the motorcycle like you're playing Mario Kart, and then like 2 or 3 Death Eaters slam into it and like break their brooms or whatever. And I'm like, come on, why would that not be in the movie? That's like ready made for a great comic gag. There's a lot of
stuff in that particular scene that didn't make it into the movie. I felt like that.
Yeah, they changed a lot of stuff for that. Yeah, that I was not a big fan of, but I did like a lot of what they did with it. But yeah. And then again, this is where they go back to this time, and they had the changes for the movie, is that all of the Death Eaters in the scene in the movie are on brooms again for some reason.
Yeah.
Whereas our people are on a combination of brooms, thestrals, and the motorcycle, I believe, in the book. And I think in the movie, I think they're on thestrals.
Yeah.
A couple of them, like Bill or whatever. But we've established in movies 5 and 6, a thing that I've discussed my hatred of is that all of the Death Eaters and the Order of the Phoenix, the elder members of the Order of the Phoenix, can turn into like ghosts or smoke monsters and fly around. Yeah, they all
shoot around as pillars of smoke, basically.
And I've always hated that for a couple of reasons, and one of the very specific reasons is that it's a big deal that Voldemort can fly in the book. In this book, when he flies up to Harry on the motorcycle in this chapter. And then when they land and after everything goes down, they're like, he was flying. And everybody's like, what? Voldemort was flying? Yeah. And they're like, no broom.
They make a point to be like, he wasn't on a broom or a thestral or anything.
He was just flying.
Just flying around out there.
And so it's this big, impressive thing. But it's like, no, it's not. Everybody has done that for the last 2 movies. Yeah. And again, all of a sudden now, everybody's just on brooms. Because... you can't do the combat of this scene if they're just smoke monsters, because they have to shoot spells at each other and stuff. So it's like, you really didn't think this one through, movie.
Maybe you can't shoot spells as a smoke monster.
No, you can't. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
At least it doesn't seem like it. It seems like you battle through like sheer force of will or something. I don't know. I hate it. I fucking hate it. It's one of my least favorite decisions they made in any of the movies. Again, I understand that it like looks cool. It doesn't fit in with anything we've ever seen in any of the books or anything. And again, they have to change it here because it doesn't work.
Right. Yes. All of a sudden it really, really doesn't work.
Yeah. In the movie, they figure out it's Harry because of Hedwig. In the book, they figure out it's him because he uses Expelliarmus on Stan Shunpike. Because Stan Shunpike shows up and Harry doesn't want to hurt him. And so he uses Expelliarmus on him to get rid of his wand, but it doesn't stupefy him, so he falls to his death or whatever. And that's how they realize that it's Harry. Which, again, we've joked about it, but it's great because it's one thing. It's a comment on Harry's character about how he, his innate goodness and that sort of thing of not, even when his life is being threatened, he does what he can to not hurt other people. His
goal is to disarm.
Right. But No, but sorry, that was the point. I thought I had somewhere else I was going.
Not even Death Eaters can name a more iconic duo.
Nope, that's it. They're like, oh shit, it's him. Go get Voldemort.
Yeah, we have another movie that makes Hagrid less badass.
I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I don't even know. He must have something in movie 7 or in this next movie in part 2. I don't know. I don't remember. But holy shit. So again, we every book I've mentioned, or every movie / book I've mentioned this, there's been a moment where Hagrid has done something freaking crazy badass, and then the movie has not had it in it. And in this one, they do the extra disservice of him just getting knocked unconscious halfway through this chase scene.
Yeah.
I was like, did the what's his name? Did the actor, I can't remember his name now, I'm blanking on it, like get sick like for like half the shooting, and so they like made him unconscious, slumped over the steering wheel so they could just have a body double or something. It was so weird because he just gets stunned like halfway through, and Harry has to like fly the motorcycle and like fight people off all at the same time. But in the book, a Death Eater comes up to the side of their motorcycle and goes to kill him or something, and Hagrid leaps off of the motorcycle in midair onto the broom and onto the Death Eater and starts like beating the shit out of them in midair. And then somehow Harry, I don't remember, I'd have to go back and look, but somehow Harry gets him back off that and gets him back into the motorcycle. I'm not exactly sure how that happens. Oh, I think he falls and Harry catches him? I don't remember. But whatever it is, would have been awesome in the movie.
That would have been an insane scene.
Yes.
And it makes me wonder if like maybe they have a hard time finding a big enough stunt double,
or it's just tough to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I that doesn't seem like it would be that hard to.
I don't know.
I mean, based on what we've seen with the way they do stunts, you don't get a big stunt double. You get small stunt doubles for the other people,
right?
You know, and get a normal size stunt double. Like they just, I don't know, call up whoever worked on Lord of the Rings and figure out how they did Uruk-hai versus halfling stunts, and then do that. Like I don't, it's just weird to me that they never have him doing any of the cool things he does.
Knocking him unconscious is, and it's canon in the books too that he's really hard to stun.
Yeah, because he gets hit with a stun. You're right, and he doesn't. He spells bounce off him, which is a thing I'll withhold my judgment slightly for book 7 or part 2, and thinking maybe they were saving this. But yeah, canonically in the books, we get all these moments where people try to cast spells at him, and he's like, "I'm a motherfucking giant," and they just bounce off of him, and we don't ever get to see that. Which
also would have been really cool to see.
I know. It's like, do you guys not know what the Hulk is, and like how people like the Hulk? You have that. Use it. Like you basically have that in your movie. You're just not using it. Like, what are you doing? When they finally get back, George gets right. It is George. Yeah, gets. I can never remember which one gets the hole in the head and which one gets murdered.
George that gets the hole in his head.
But they do the scene where he gets a hole inside of his head. But I thought they did a terrible job depicting what I imagined that looked like. Well,
it just looked like there was a lot of blood, but you couldn't really see what had happened.
Yeah, because they describe it very explicitly in the book that Harry looks at him and said where his ear should have been, there's just a gaping black hole.
Yeah,
basically, and it sounds terrifying. And,
right, because that's not how skulls work.
Yeah. I don't know what they would have done to make it, and I guess maybe they were trying to figure out how to work around the PG-13 rating because they couldn't make it too weird, you know what I mean? So I'll give him some benefit there, but he just is like bloody. It looks like he got his ear kind of sliced and started bleeding a lot, and I'm like, but then it was just, it didn't look how I imagined it to look, but again, I can see how that would have been tough to do.
The movie speeds up a lot of what happens
right here,
while they're staying at the Weasleys.
As they're preparing to leave.
Yeah, which I get.
Yeah.
But we also skipped over, I thought, a lot of like fun, interesting details.
Yeah. I had forgot about this until I reread this, that they set up this whole side story, or not side story, cover story for Ron.
Yeah, the Ron's decoy ghoul.
Yeah. Because the burrow has a ghoul living in it. Which we found out in the first book or second book. I don't know. Whenever Harry went to visit, they have a ghoul living in their attic, and they transfigure the ghoul to look kind of like Ron and put it in his pajamas. And then that way they can tell people that when Ron doesn't show up to Hogwarts because he's out looking for Horcruxes with Harry, he can tell them, He's at home sick with Spattergroit.
I think is
It's
how
it's spelled.
And it's apparently this like super horrific wizarding world disease.
Yeah.
And it's really contagious.
It's like polio or something.
So it's like the perfect cover because
like smallpox.
Yeah, nobody's gonna want to get near him enough to see if it's actually him.
Yeah, but they have this ghoul that just sits around and moans all day anyways, so they're like perfect. He'll have red hair and do it. And so it's just great. And they actually, in the book, mentioned that did happen, that somebody did come and investigate it, why he wasn't at school. And they showed him the ghoul and they were like, all right, that's fine. So,
a couple other things. Hermione has a story about how she stole some banned books out of Dumbledore's office like a motherfucking badass.
And that's how she learns stuff about the Horcrux, which we don't get in the movie, is that she actually knows a fair amount about Horcruxes by the time they start their journey, because she got these books from Dumbledore's office that he had removed from the library. But they discussed that were in the library when Riddle was there, which is how he learned about them originally. But yeah, and she levitates him out the window. Yeah. Which, yeah, good for her.
Another little thing that we get lost is on Harry's birthday when he's allowed to do magic now.
When the trace is lifted.
He's no longer underage. He starts off his day by just doing a bunch of random shit by magic.
Every petty little thing that you would normally do manually, he uses magic to do.
But I love that because absolutely everyone would do that.
Yeah. Yeah,
no question.
Yeah, he Accios his glasses from his night table a foot to his right to his hand, and like just everything.
And then Ron's like, "Don't try to do up your fly by magic."
yeah. It's they're little things that kids, or not kids. Well, they are kids, but teenagers do.
And there are sexual innuendos in this book.
Yes, there are.
In my good Christian Harry Potter books.
Several times.
One here when Ron has gotten Harry a book for his birthday about how to charm witches. Mm-hmm. And
I had a note about that. I forgot to mention it.
He says it's not all about wand work either.
Yeah. I was like, Ron bought Harry a shitty pickup artist book. Yeah. Cool. Ron would, though, to be fair. Fucking Ron would. But yeah, I was like, great. We don't get Fleur's parents at all. Yeah. Fleur Delacour, which she's reintroduced finally, which she's been in the past couple books. Yes. And hasn't been in the movies. Yes.
And I understand cutting Fleur's parents, but I thought they were kind of fun. Yeah. Interesting characters.
Interesting versions of...
Because you would expect them to be kind of snobby. Yeah. Based on what we've seen of Fleur, but they're totally not.
Well, I thought the implication was that her mom was kind of a little, but that her dad is very jovial and... Maybe not.
Her
I could be
was
wrong.
All right.
I don't know. Maybe I just thought that I tied that in because her mom's like very pretty, and seems like very elegant, like she is, whereas her dad's like this... I imagine her dad looking not too dissimilar from Vernon Dursley, except like a little more handsome.
They say he's like kind of short and rotund, and like very jolly,
and bald. I think, yeah. So, but yeah, they're fun characters. But yeah, I get why they weren't in there. This change I absolutely understand, and they do this a lot in this movie where they drop Polyjuice Potion.
Yeah, there's a whole lot more Polyjuice Potion in the book than there is in the movie.
This one, I get. The one later I absolutely think was the right change, and we'll talk about it when we get there. This one, Harry goes to the wedding as a Weasley cousin. Mm-hmm. He goes as cousin Barney, because there's going to be a lot of people there that don't need to know that Harry's staying with the Weasleys, because they don't know that everybody coming to this wedding is necessarily like it's not just people from the Order at this wedding. It's all kinds of people from all over the place. Like Victor Crumb is there, which is one of the things.
And you don't know who's gonna run their mouth, right? Or
so they just have Harry pretend to be a cousin so that he can be at the party, but not have to worry about whether or not people start talking about Harry being there and that sort of thing. But in the movie, it ends up not mattering because the attack happens and they just immediately run away. So it's not like that big of a deal, like in the movie, that it changed, because it didn't end up affecting anything. But ultimately, it could have if things hadn't gone all to hell right away. Oh, and also in the book, Luna knows it's Harry, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah.
She walks right up to him.
Canon evidence of Luna just knowing shit.
Yeah.
For no reason than that she's Luna.
She just walks up to Harry and goes and says, like, Harry? And he's like, how did you know it was me? And she said, I think she says, like, I could just tell, or like the way you carry yourself or something like that. But yeah, she just knows it's him, which is I love Luna.
And then Fred in the book has a line at the wedding that just hurt my heart. He's like, when I get married, I'm going to do blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
fuck you, J.K. Rowling. God damn it. Yeah. Which we'll talk about. I'm not convinced that J.K. Rowling needed to kill quite as many people as she did in this book, especially at the end.
I think some would argue that she should have killed more people.
Maybe different people. I don't know. Here's the thing. I will say this. I read this before I read. Did I read? No, I didn't. Did I? No. Well, regardless, comparing this to Return of the King, it's like Return of the King, like fucking everybody lives.
Yeah.
Like everybody lives. And then I read this and I'm like, this is a kid's book. I mean, Lord of the Rings is not a kid's book, but it's not really a kid's book. It's more. I think the audience for Lord of the Rings skews older than for Harry Potter generally. And it's like, in this kid's book, she kills like everybody. She kills like half the people.
Well, and I think the thing of it is that I don't even know if we should talk about this here.
Yeah, probably not too much, but
and at the end, a lot of the people who die kind of without fanfare.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that. It's mainly a couple deaths. We'll talk about it. There was a couple that I really had problems with, or not problems with, that I'm just like, I don't know if you need it. Well, I don't know if you need to go that dark.
But back to the wedding.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought you had something about Auntie Muriel.
Not her, but about the scene.
About the exchange between.
Just the whole scene.
Yeah.
But I agree with this note.
I thought movie Auntie Muriel just paled in comparison to book, and because book and had something to say about everything.
Oh my goodness!
Did you catch when she was complaining about Fleur being French?
Yes. Yeah, she was like, not happy that Fleur's
she's a nice girl for a French person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh gosh. All right. But yeah, I do agree that the movie Auntie Muriel doesn't, and I wasn't even sure she was going to be in it. But she does show up. But yeah, she doesn't hold a candle to the book. The book one is just the worst. Yeah. She's literally the worst. And I have a couple notes about it later. Yeah, she's super nasty and just awful. And then kind of everybody hates her. But I did overall that scene I'll talk about later. But yeah, her character wasn't close. And we mentioned it earlier, but Victor Crumb's at the wedding, which is interesting because it's a little moment, and it kind of helps spur some of Ron's feelings that sort of ruminate and come to the surface later in the book/movie of his sort of insecurity and that sort of thing. Seeing Victor Crumb again, and Hermione's all happy and like hugs him and that sort of thing, and he gets, he's like, you know, and so it was just kind of interesting to see him be there, it would also make sense because he was the champion with Fleur and all these other people.
It's a fun callback.
Yeah. I could not agree more with this note.
Kingsley's Patronus in the book is actually a Patronus.
Yes.
And it's like
an otter.
It's like a lynx.
A lynx, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And in the movie, it's just like a ball
of light
with and you can see some images of people running. I'm like, movie. Is it that hard to show an actual Patronus?
They could not come to one idea of what they wanted a Patronus to look like and it seems so obvious because you know what? It looks exactly how the doe looks at the end of this movie.
Yeah.
That's what a Patronus looks like. They should have all just been animals of that. Even Umbridge's, like the cat.
Yeah.
Looks like they know how to do it, but then here's what I think. They thought, I don't know, because in the movie what they do is they make it this ball of light and images of fleeing people and chaos are kind of emanating from it, and it's sort of, I guess, supposed to be almost like a hologram kind of thing, basically, of this is what's happening at the Ministry, people are dying, chaos, run, to make it more ominous than if a lynx showed up and was talking, might not be as scary maybe, but I agree that it's that's my only thought is that's why they changed that.
But that's not what a Patronus is.
I know. The Patronus is not just a ball of light that gives. Yeah, it does. I agree. I agree.
So they leave the wedding.
Oh, gosh, yes, this.
And then the whole entire movie almost ends when they very nearly get run over by a bus.
In the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, which doesn't happen in the book. They're just on the sidewalk, from what I recall. But yeah, in the movie, they almost get run over by a bus. And I was like, boy, that would be an ceremonial ending.
Well, guess Voldemort wins.
Yeah. Our three heroes just got flattened by a double-decker. But, yeah, so then they end up in the book, they end up in Tottenham Court Road. They end up somewhere slightly different in the movie, I'm assuming, because of shooting logistics or whatever. It doesn't matter. But we both had this note because, of course, it's, typical, is that they came from a wedding, so they're wearing, like, fancy clothing.
Formal wear.
And they're walking down the street to go find somewhere to go change because Hermione's got clothes, and Hermione gets catcalled from, like, a group of dudes across the street.
Yeah, like at a pub or something.
Yeah. It's like, yep.
Yep.
Fantastic.
That tracks. But they eventually end up at 12 Grimmauld Place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was where we saw that in the 5th book, where that was where the order was. It was Sirius's house.
It's Sirius's old house, which is now, and they leave this out. Was it in the last book? Probably. Or this one? The last one? I think it was in the last one where they discussed that it was left to Harry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dumbledore tells him, and it wasn't in the movie, I don't think. But in the book, in the 6th book, Dumbledore explains, Grimmauld Place is yours now.
Basically willed
willed the house to
all
everything
the stuff
to
he
you.
had.
So that Harry can get in there. Also, he knows of it because Dumbledore's a secret keeper, and he knew the secret. So they're going to go there and hang out because it's under the Fidelius charm still, technically, because they all, once Dumbledore died, everybody who knew about it became the secret keeper,
which makes it vulnerable
because Snape
knew.
Yeah,
but he doesn't ever show up while they're there.
And we ultimately find out the reason for that.
Yes,
but they're under the assumption, they're hoping, they don't really have anywhere else to go. They're like, we just kind of have to go there and hope that Snape doesn't come back or doesn't, whatever. It's kind of like hoping that Snape doesn't come find them there. But while they're there, they go up. Harry, and we see this in the movie, Harry goes and explores and finds Sirius's room and is looking around. And there's kind of really interesting stuff in there. There's like a picture of him back in school and like posters of bikini-clad muggles, which I thought was a random weird thing. But he finds a letter from Lily.
Yeah, from his mom.
Written to Sirius from when Harry was like
a year old.
Yeah, well, it's literally like a week or something before his parents die.
Yeah. There's a really kind of heart-wrenching moment where he notices that his mom's handwriting has some similarities to his.
Specifically the G.
Yeah.
The way they write their G's. Doesn't make any sense, but magic, so it does. It's like, handwriting's not hereditary, I don't think. But yeah, in a magic world, sure. Sure, it can be. So this... they really blow this. The creature. They blew
hard.
Creature. The creature scenes, all of them, kind of, to some extent. They kind of neutered the heck. And maybe in the deleted scenes, there's more of this.
Yeah.
I would think there probably is, because this is pretty important. But in the movie, sorry, in the book, no, let's start with in the movie. In the movie, Harry finds Creature in the house. In the book, they go looking for him because they figure out RAB, Regulus. They do that all goes similar to how it does in the movie. And then they rush to go find Creature because they want to ask him about the locket because they're like, oh, maybe he would know because he was here. Also, they know because they remember the setup from book 5
where they found the locket,
which they didn't do in the movie.
Yeah.
But in the book 5, there's one passage they're cleaning out the drawing room, I believe it is, or the library or something, and they find this old heavy locket that quote unquote none of them can open, and they get rid of it, or they they
and it's just casually
mentioned in a
things.
But they recall that. In this moment when they realize it was Regulus who stole the locket, and they're like, holy shit, maybe that locket we found 2 years ago was the locket. So they go and they find Creature and they talk to him and they're like, hey, did you help him get a locket? Do you know anything about this locket? Do you have the locket? All that sort of stuff. And Creature relays the tale of how they went and captured the locket, which we get none of in the movie, which was really disappointing because it's a really interesting and, again, important sort of theme of underestimating non-wizards, and which we get a lot throughout this book, and is just absent from the movie. But he relays the fact that he went with Regulus, and Regulus drank the potion, and that Creature then got him out, right? Basically, Creature went with Regulus and did this with him, and that because Voldemort underestimates non-wizards of all sorts, muggles, elves, goblins, just anybody who's not a wizard he doesn't give a shit about. He thinks they're not worthy of his respect or is thought of on any level. Creature is able to apparate out of the cave where the locket is, and so he's able to grab Regulus, apparate out, and then Regulus ends up dying from the potion, I think is the implication.
I think, let me double check, because
or maybe he doesn't get Regulus out. Maybe Regulus just dies there. No, you're right. He does. He just dies there.
Just die there.
And yes, and Creature just takes the locket and apparates out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he comes back and puts, or no. Yeah, he doesn't come back. I thought he came back, but.
Yeah, he ordered Creature to leave without him, to go home, to never tell my mistress what he had done, but to destroy the first locket.
His mistress being Mrs. Black.
Mrs. Black, yeah.
And destroy the first locket. And yeah, Regulus had brought the other locket and left it there, I think. So yeah. So anyways, Creature is able to get out because he has elven magic that is different and not necessarily superior, but in some ways it is. But also it's different than the magic wizards do. And it's not something that Voldemort had ever considered as a threat. So that's why Creature is able to do this, which again is a really important thematic moment in terms of setting up the fact that the downfall of Voldemort and all turns comes from his both arrogance, his lack of compassion, and his bigotry, essentially. And again, they just don't have that really. It doesn't play. There's some of an attempt at those themes is in the movies throughout their moments, like in the ministry with the Muggles under the thing. There's like they hint at it, but they don't ever get like the really important moments that kind of linchpin that theme.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, Creature had this horrible traumatic experience that he's never been able to tell anyone about.
Never told anybody.
And in the book, it's a growing moment for everyone there.
Yes. And that's the thing, in the movie, Harry just kind of stays not nice to him.
Yeah.
In the book, their relationship completely transforms.
Yeah. Now,
Creature's still a bit of a bigot because he was raised by horrible bigots and taught nothing but bigotry his whole life. So he's still a bit of a, not a great person. But he starts to slowly change, at least from what we see in the book. Whereas he's in the movie, we see it where he calls Hermione a mudblood. He's like, "How dare you talk to me?" and all that stuff, which he still does. But we get to a point in the book where eventually, even Creature, as he's leaving to go do something, at one point in the book, he like kind of bows, to Hermione, he's trying, he's getting, he's getting there. And all it took was for Harry and for them to show him some compassion. And the big thing he does is in this moment, I think it's in this moment, he gives Creature the old locket, the fake locket that they had, because it was Regulus's. He goes, "Here, you know what, take this old," and Creature like fucking loses his mind. Like so happy about having this thing that belonged to his old master, and it's a really important moment. And again, it's just all cut from the movie, which is really rough.
Another thing that got cut was Lupin.
Lupin shows
to
up
see them while they're staying at Grimold Place, and I'm okay with his scene getting cut.
I agree. It's a downer.
I don't think it was wholly necessary to the story in any way.
No.
But there was a particular exchange that I wish could have found its way into the movie because it's just super fucking relevant.
It's an internally relevant exchange. And you posted a picture of this on your Facebook.
No, it was on my Instagram.
Or whatever. Not on
not on ours.
Yeah. So the Ministry has established a Muggle registry, essentially Muggle-born registry. Sorry, and this is Hermione reading it. Muggle-born register. The Ministry of Magic is undertaking a survey of so-called "quote-unquote" Muggle-borns to understand how they came to possess magical secrets. Recent research undertaken by the Department of Mysteries reveals that magic can only be passed from person to person when wizards reproduce. Where no proven wizarding ancestry exists, therefore, the so-called Muggleborn is likely to have obtained magical power by theft or force. The Ministry is determined to root out such usurpers of magical power, and to this end has issued an invitation to every so-called Muggleborn to present themselves for interview by the newly appointed Muggleborn Registration Commission. Ron then says, "People won't let this happen." "It is happening, Ron," said Lupin. "Muggleborns are being rounded up as we speak." So yeah. It's kind of a super... Again, I think it will eternally be relevant, sometimes more than others, particularly, this book very much in particular, and this movie very much harkens and calls upon Nazi imagery. At times, the movie leans into it real hard with the choice of the outfits for the people who work for the ministry and that sort of thing. But we also get mentions in the book of, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, I have notes about that later.
But it's a super important message that if they could have found a way to work into the book, that the idea that, Ron, the sort of naive Ron, people won't let this happen, and Lupin's like, fucking happening, man.
Yeah. We're already there.
Yeah. It's the same thing that happened 60 years ago. People won't let this happen. Yeah, nope, people will let this happen unless people who have the power and the ability to say and do otherwise stand up and say something about it. So it, a very salient point that I wish they would have found a way to work into the movie. But I do agree that cutting that scene wasn't, overall, that scene wasn't the worst thing in the world. Oh, and then another creature moment. We do finally get Mundungus in this film, which is nice. He had to be in it for relevant plot details and moments. But he shows up at this point. Harry tells Creature to go find Mundungus, which is one of the things that Creature's very happy to do because he fucking hates him because he stole a bunch of stuff from the Black House. But he ultimately finds Mundungus, and when he gets him back to the Black House, he's hitting him. They show up in the kitchen and he's beating him with a frying pan. And this is another great little character moment for Creature. And again, if this happened in the movie, we just missed it. But I didn't think it happened. He's hitting him, and Harry eventually orders him to stop hitting him. And Creature turns around to Harry and says, "Perhaps one more for luck." That's just a great moment because, again, Mundungus is, and we didn't mention earlier, but if you're listening to this, you probably know, the reason Moody is dead essentially is because Mundungus is a coward. Yeah. And he's been responsible for a bunch of nonsense that he's just a coward. I mean, it's his biggest thing. He's not a terrible person. He's just a coward and is out for himself only. He at least attempts to try to be noble at times and do the right thing, but ultimately he's just out for himself. But so it's a great moment of Creature beating the shit out of him with a frying pan, which is satisfying for us because we know, again, that Mad Eye's dead because of this asshole. So then they decide they need to break into...
Yeah, because we find out that Umbridge has the locket. Yeah. So they have to go to the Ministry.
Yeah, because she has a job back at the Ministry. Well, she has a different job now. She's the Muggle Persecutor-in-Chief.
Pretty much.
Muggle-born Persecutor-in-Chief, but yeah. So everything plays out pretty similarly. They break into the Ministry. They cut a little bit of the time. We kind of time jump in the movie, but it's close enough. And they go to the Ministry, and overall, I love the whole Ministry scene. We'll talk about it later. But there's a couple little moments that they didn't include in this that I wish they had. You had a couple here.
A couple things when Harry gets into Umbridge's office, he sees basically the wanted poster of himself.
Yeah, undesirable number one.
And it has a little pink Post-it note on it that says "to be punished."
Which is very Umbridge.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that would have been an easy detail to include. There's another moment. Ron, in his disguise, has to go try to stop it from raining in one of the higher up senior members'
Yaxley?
offices.
Whatever.
I don't remember.
It's the same guy in the movie. But
so he gets out of there, and of course he's sopping wet because it's pouring down rain in this guy's office. And I don't remember who says this to him.
It's probably Harry, or is it somebody else? I don't know. Or Arnold? Or Arthur? Could it be? Because he runs into his dad at one point. Ron runs into Arthur at one point.
But somebody says, "Why are you so wet?" to him, and Ron just says, water.
Yeah. I bet it is when he runs into his dad, because his dad tells him, oh, the same thing happened in Blank's office.
Yeah.
Try this spell.
Yeah.
And then Ron goes to do that, which we don't see in the movie. But his dad tells him how to stop it, because I think the implication maybe being that perchance Arthur might have been responsible for this. I'm not saying that's what the implication is, but that's kind of the vibe you get from the book, is that once Arthur sees this, you know, poor maintenance worker having to deal with this, he's like, I'll tell him how to stop it.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling Arthur was the one who did it. It's never stated, but that's always the vibe I got from it, is that Arthur's fucking with these jerks. Oh, and this is a kind of a big one that is so weird to me that they didn't include, because it's such an easy... Mm-hmm. And now they never even explicitly state it, but we do see that when Harry goes into Umbridge's office that she has Mad-Eye Moody's eye.
Yeah.
In the book, it's mentioned that they looked for his body and never found it.
Yeah.
She has Mad-Eye Moody's eye, which she uses to spy on all of her workers to make sure that they're not, you know, getting up to nonsense or whatever. And Harry, after he breaks into his office, when he's leaving, he takes the eye, because he's like, no, if I can keep in Mad-Eye's eye.
Yeah.
And takes it with them, which doesn't happen in the movie. And then there's a nice little moment later in the movie where Harry buries it in the woods somewhere, just, you know. Again, it was like such a little thing that seems like it would have been easy.
You would think.
To have. It's also the reason they get found out.
Yes.
When they're escaping, which I feel like it kind of would have... The way they do it in the movie is fine, where it's just kind of obvious that they're... Well, in the movie, they start turning back into themselves.
Right.
Which makes... I understand why they did that, which we'll talk about. Well, I don't know if we will. I don't think I had it, but I think we can talk about it here. I liked actually kind of that he changes back into himself, because you want that moment of Harry confronting Umbridge to be Harry and not the random guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the body switch stuff is good for like visual gags and like humor, but for like serious dramatic moments,
no, I agree.
It's a little bit lost.
I think it works really well when he starts to say that I must not tell lies,
and then
line
turns
to her,
into Harry.
and he's
Yeah,
turning
like
into himself.
It's a great moment,
Yeah.
and so they wanted him to be Harry for that. So with him leaving, it doesn't really matter if they find out that he stole the eye, because it's just Harry walking through the fucking ministry. Like, so yeah, I get it, but I really still wish he would have taken Mad-Eye's eye. Oh, and then when he's leaving, he leads a battalion. So they have a whole bunch of Muggleborns and Half-Bloods or whatever in the outside of the courtroom, awaiting their trial or whatever. And Harry goes out there and they like stunned a couple Death Eaters that are around, and he's like, we're getting the fuck out of here. And he leads like a fucking army of Muggleborns out of the thing. And he punches I guess it's not a Death Eater. It might just be, it is. It's a Death Eater working for the Ministry at this point, in the face. Yeah. Which would have been fun. I really wish we would have saw Harry Potter punch a Death Eater in the face, but they cut it. That would have been a super contentious argument to have now. Should Harry punch a Death Eater?
Yes. The answer is yes.
Let's leave it at that.
So then they have to go on the world's worst camping trip.
Oh, the world's worst camping trip, yes. And the movie, I think, does an overall good job with this. But one thing that doesn't come across in the movie is that they have no food.
Yeah, they're basically starving.
Because they can't go back to Grimmauld Place, which is what happens in the movie and the book, is that she tries to go back to Grimmauld Place, where they have some food because Order people have been bringing them food. Mm-hmm. But they can't go back there because the guy was grabbed onto them. And so she shook him off, but he landed on the step at Grimmauld Place, which means he can now get in there.
Yes.
So they have to just go out in the middle of nowhere, but they don't have any food with them, because they were planning on going back to Grimmauld Place and having a kidney pie that Creature was preparing, because that's another thing we don't get. Creature becomes like a great house elf, and Grimmauld Place is like shining and clean, and like he cooks some food all the time and stuff, and we don't get any of that, which would have been delightful.
So bad for Creature.
Yeah, we do see him later in this book,
yes.
in a triumphant return, but we'll get there in part 2. But yeah, so they have no food, and that's one of the main contributing factors to Ron's mood.
Yeah. Because Ron is spoiled.
Yeah, Ron likes his food. He's a growing boy. He's huge. He's like 7 foot tall, and he needs his food. But yeah, they don't have any food. They're like eating mushrooms and like stealing eggs and like just scraping by. Which again, it's not as important as sort of the rest of it, but I think it added to sort of the desperation. Mm-hmm. Because when you don't have food, it things can get real desperate real quick. because hello, you need food. And we find out, we get a fun little magic thing, like, well, why can't they just magic themselves food? You can't make food out of nothing.
Yeah, apparently that's a thing you can't
It is
do.
an exception to one of Gamp's 5 laws or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, you can't create food out of whole cloth. You can multiply it if you have it, and you can summon it from places, which again, I feel like they could just summon and hope. I guess the range on summoning charms isn't that far, but
I mean, there are moments when they have food though, because they're able to go to Muggle
you think they
supermarkets.
could multiply
You'd think they would just keep multiplying.
You're right. Yeah, they do get some actual food a couple times,
Yeah.
and then still somehow are starving afterwards. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, but whatever. But anyways, that's that. They don't ever really touch on that in the movie.
Also in the book, something the movie skips over. There is a scene where they don't meet up with these people, but they hear them outside having a conversation. It's some people that are on the run from the Ministry / Death Eaters.
Because they are Muggleborns / in the Order of the Phoenix / goblins.
Yes. And it's a couple of them are people that we've met before. There's Ted Tonks, who is Tonks' dad. We don't meet him in the movie, but he's at the beginning of the book. Yeah. We meet up with him. And there's Dean Thomas.
Yeah. One of Harry's classmates.
Who we know.
Fellow Gryffindor. Who gets shafted in this movie. He's actually in a lot of this movie, or book, rather.
Yeah, he is, actually.
Not a lot, but he's in the end of this. What would have been, he should have been in the end of this movie if it were exactly what it was in the book. But I kind of understand why they dropped him, but I don't think they needed to. I don't,
and then there's also Griphook, the goblin, who was the goblin that took Harry to his Gringotts vault in the first book. Yeah. Quite the callback there.
Yes, quite the callback. And they're all on the run together because, they're all kind of outcasts.
And with another goblin whose name I don't remember, and then another guy that I don't think we had ever met before.
No, just some random guy.
So the movie cuts that. And I was fine with that. I think it's a fine cut.
It's fine. The only thing that really happens there is the sword exposition.
Yeah, that provides the exposition for the sword, which in the movie makes Hermione realize that the sword is the sword. She's just out of fucking nowhere.
She's just cutting Harry's hair and goes,
and then all of a sudden she's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, she's like, the sword. And they hear Griphook talking about the sword, and I don't hate... I'm of two minds about this because, one, I'm not sure the story as presented in the movie makes sense. Yeah. But the story as presented in the book is a little confusing and convoluted.
It's a little convoluted.
In the sense that it's the sword of Gryffindor was... Griphook put the sword of Gryffindor in Bellatrix Lestrange's vault. Mm-hmm. It's important that they know that it's there, to be fair, which I don't know how they're going to figure out they need to go to... Did that happen in this book? Or is that going to happen at the beginning of the next movie where they're going to figure out they need to go to Bellatrix's vault?
Well,
that's going to be at the beginning of the next movie. Yeah. How are they going to figure that out?
But they still show her freaking out.
They show her freaking out in this movie. I'm saying, but they didn't hear... but did she say it in the movie? Oh, I'd have to pay attention during that scene. Because here's the thing. The reason they know in the book that there's a Horcrux in Bellatrix Lestrange's vault is because she starts freaking out when Griphook tells her the sword is fake. No. When she sees the sword, she thinks it's the sword she thinks somebody broke into her vault.
Right.
And so she's terrified because she thinks maybe they got the Horcrux or whatever.
Yeah.
That means Harry now knows, or Hermione, whoever figures it out, I think it's Harry, figures out because she freaked out, there's obviously something else important in there. Mm-hmm. It must be a Horcrux. Yeah,
so we need to go there.
We need to go there.
Do that.
The reason he knows that is because he heard Griphook earlier say that he put the sword in Bellatrix's vault. Mm-hmm. So my guess is that in the movie, and again, I just probably missed it, that she says something about her vault. Like, this sword's supposed to be in my vault or something like that. Or, you know what I mean?
One thing...
I was a little confused by that in the movie.
One thing that is in the book that we read in these chapters that isn't in the movie, and I'm assuming it's at the beginning of part 2, is when he talks to Griphook and Ollivander. Right. So they're probably going to start
No, that is. I remember that in the beginning of the next movie.
They're probably going to start out with that, and that will be the thing that clears things up.
Yeah. I guess. I'm still a little confused because Harry goes to Griphook saying I need to break into the vault because he knows the sword's fake. And he tells Griphook to tell...
He doesn't tell Griphook to...
In the book, he tells Griphook to tell Bellatrix the sword's fake, and Griphook does. In the movie, Griphook just tells her it's fake for some reason. He does. You hear him say this is a fake.
I don't know.
So she doesn't think that the vault... I was a little confused by all that and about how they were going to make that all add up. And I'm not sure that it does, and that they're just expecting us to not think about it too hard.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But here we are. Thinking about it.
And I maybe somebody else could clarify this, but I was a little confused about how that all added up in the movie. It adds up in the book, but it adds up slightly kind of weird. Like, it's a little just kind of clunky and like...
So I guess then maybe there's just no real good way to do it. It's either going to be a little bit convoluted or it's not going to pan out.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe the movie does make sense. I just needed to pay more attention. Again, I was writing notes about a million things, so I just may have missed why it made sense.
We'll see when we watch part 2, but I'm betting they're going to like retcon it a
kind
little
of
bit.
And explain it. Yeah. Okay.
And explain it away.
Fair enough. We spent too long talking about that.
Yes,
so let's
we
move on. So they go to Godric's Hollow, which is important. Also, they don't mention this in the movie, but I felt dumb. I feel like I didn't realize that it's named after Godric Gryffindor. I felt dumb like Harry, because Harry also didn't
both
realize.
You and Harry.
I was like, oh yeah, duh.
Yeah.
Godric's Hollow is named after Godric Gryffindor, and it's one of the oldest like wizarding towns. Like they kind of similar to how immigrants in coming to like America stayed in groups. You know, there's like the Chinatown and areas of that sort of thing. A similar idea where they're like these little villages around England that are like concentrations of wizards.
A large wizarding population.
Godric's Hollow is one of the most, or one of the most famous ones. Pretty good overall, this whole scene. But when they get there, there's a couple things I really wish they would have had in the movie. One is that they see a World War II memorial, or one of the two. And as they approach it, it changes from a World War II memorial into a memorial for Harry and his parents. Yeah. Which I thought would have been really cool.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. And yeah, apparently the idea being that only wizards can see sort of that version of it, but Muggles just see a World War II memorial. Also, they do, and I thought they were going to leave this out of the movie, but they keep it in. They go and they see Harry's house, which has been preserved and in state of how it was the night Voldemort attacked, where the roofs kind of collapsed from the spell backfiring. And they have a nice little moment there in the movie, but in the book, there's a really cool moment where when he gets there, he puts his hand on the gate and a
sign comes up.
A signpost comes up, like you're at a historical site or something.
Yeah. And
it says here on this site on October 31st, 1981, or whatever the date was. Yeah. And they kind of little history. And what is cool about it though is that people who have come to this place have all signed like graffitied on it, and it's all stuff like we believe in Harry Potter, like support basically.
It's a nice moment of the wizarding community, or at least part of it really is behind him.
Yeah, and it's something Harry really needed in that moment, because Hermione says something like, "Oh, I can't believe people wrote all over it," and Harry's like, "I'm super glad they did." Like it makes him feel like there are people that believe me and believe in me, and don't. It's not the whole world against me.
Oh, another thing that gets left out is that Harry, we've established that he can sometimes read Voldemort's thoughts.
Yeah.
And when he goes there, he kind of like has this Voldemort flashback to the night that his parents died. And
we actually get to see it.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing play out, basically, from the time Voldemort comes to the house until the spell backfires. Yeah. Which we'd only ever seen brief glimpses of it.
Yeah, like bits and pieces.
But we get the whole thing play out, which is, it's intense, but it would have been very intense and sort of, I don't want to say cool to see, but would have added to it a little bit. So they get in, they talk to Bathilda, all that stuff happens. At one point when he's talking to her, and I don't remember exactly what happens here. It might be when the snake realizes it's Harry, or something happens, and the locket freaks out because Harry's wearing the locket around his chest, and it turns like white hot and like sears into his chest, and so he has this locket scar on his chest for the rest of his life. Yeah. And I don't know how you necessarily show that in the movie, because again, it's under his clothes, and it's there's not really a good way necessarily to show that in that scene, because we just read that it happens. But there's also a moment later in the book where Harry's taking stock of all the injuries he has sort of suffered over the course of his battle against Voldemort, and he has this scar from the locket on his chest. He has the scar, obviously, on his head, and he has another one on his arm. Oh, the basilisk.
Yeah.
Or not the basilisk. Nagini bites him after this scene, and he has the scar from the snake bite on his arm, and so he's just like taking stock of the toll this battle is taking on him. And I think there's something poetic about, not poetic maybe is the right word, but sort of poignant, but just a moment of Harry in the movie where we see the physical toll this is taking on him would have been a good, I mean, we kind of see it just in general, but a moment of him getting dressed where we see this locket scar on his chest and the fang bites on his arm, and it's just, you can see the toll it's taking on him, I think would have really added weight to the overall sort of like, Jesus, this is not, this is rough. This is not easy for him. Oh, and they drop all of the Dumbledore stuff.
Yes.
Which is, and maybe they'll have more in part 2. Possibly.
Like, Dumbledore, it turns out, has a kind of shady past.
A very dark past. He was friends with Grindelwald for a summer and was very sympathetic. Not only sympathetic, but also promoting the ideas
like
that
instrumental.
Yes, in the rise of Grindelwald's ideas that wizards should rule over humans, Muggles. And in fact, we read a letter written by Dumbledore, and it has a lot of language in it. And you can see, it's written very well in the sense that you can see the misguided, like, this is terrible, but from a weird, like, ignorant, misguided youth, you can see he's like, look, we need to rule over the Muggles, or we can take our place over the Muggles for the betterment of them, and it's awful and it's gross, but it's like, I think it's written in a way that where you can see that it's something that he, even though it's saying awful things, it's coming from some place of at least a veiled, like, attempted, like,
it's that old kind of writing adage of, like, every villain thinks they're the hero of their own story,
right, and
kind of a thing,
right, yeah. But it's also, that, and then, I think this movie or the book does a good job of sort of touching on the idea of somebody having truly horrible ideas, but then growing and learning, and overcoming that, and then spending the rest of their life fighting against that. But it's also the very interesting, which again, the movie doesn't do any of this, of Harry dealing with it and coming to terms with this sort of like,
because Harry essentially has like a crisis of faith.
Yes,
throughout the whole book, faith in Dumbledore. Yeah,
which is somewhat there in the movie when in terms of like, well, we can't find these Horcruxes. What are we doing? We don't know where we're going. Why didn't Dumbledore tell us any of this stuff? But in the book, it's not only that. It's, well, Dumbledore didn't tell me anything. He was this like basically like this racist when he was younger, and he was working with Grindelwald, and he was basically on board with Grindelwald's plan to like overthrow Muggles and take over the world and all that sort of thing. And he had these really kind of dark like power aspirations. And the Dumbledore I knew is this kindly old grandpa wizard, who's like, Muggles are really great. We should love Muggles and take care of them, like that sort of thing. And it's like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't add up. And he's like, is that all a lie? Was Dumbledore just everything he told me about, and all the sort of views he espoused when I knew him, was that all just a facade? Like, what's the real Dumbledore? And I think that's a really interesting character narrative, but we don't get it in the movie. I can see how it's tough to kind of keep, again, we're losing thematic elements for the sake of plot.
I think it would have been hard to portray.
Because a lot of letters, it's a lot of book reading is part of it.
It's a lot of letters and
reading Rita Skeeter's books
articles and all this different
all of
ephemera that he looks at. And
all
stuff.
of that is portrayed through reading stuff. Yes, which in a movie is not
reading
ideal.
Stuff and inner monologue. Both of which are boring to portray in a film.
So I can see why it's tough to do and why they didn't do it, but
But it is really interesting.
It is really interesting, compelling stuff, and it's unfortunate that it wasn't in the movie as much. And maybe we'll get some of it in Crimes of Grindelwald, but probably not. We both had this note, so I'll let you take this one.
All right. So Ron shows up again. We get the sword and all that.
The moment where Harry finds and follows the doe to the pool,
Yeah.
sees the sword, and attempts to get it out of the lake.
And Ron is there to pull him out of the lake.
Yeah.
When the Horcrux tries to drown him.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about all that more in
Yeah.
a later segment. But there's one line in the book that I don't know why they didn't put in the movie.
It makes so much sense. It's so good.
Because basically Harry is kind of relating.
Because Ron
what
is still
happened.
feeling shitty.
Yeah.
And Ron's like, or Harry, yeah.
And Harry's like, you just saved my life,
Yeah.
and blah, 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 blah. And
You
he
jumped
kinda,
in there. You pulled the sword out. You saved me. You did all this stuff.
And Ron's like, oh, you make it sound way cooler than it was.
Yeah.
And Harry says, stuff like that always sounds cooler than it really was. I've been trying to tell you that for years.
Exactly.
Which is a perfect encapsulation of their relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of the hero worship Ron has for him and Ron's own insecurity. And then, yeah, it's just because it was the same thing Harry was trying to explain in book 5 when they're starting the DA, where they're like, you defeated the basilisk. You stopped, what's his name? In the Quirrell and kept him from getting the Sorcerer's Stone. You know, you did this, you did that, you completed the maze. And he's like, I had all this help. It wasn't that big of a deal. It's not that cool. And it's the exact same moment where Harry gets to turn that around on Ron and be like, dude, I told you. When you do it, it doesn't feel like you're doing these grand, impressive things. You're just doing stuff.
A lot more stuff happens with Ron, which
Yeah.
we'll talk about later, because I thought all that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Then they go to see the Lovegoods.
Yeah.
You had their house in a different section.
I do. In general, at least the interior.
I thought the interior
Okay.
was good. The outside, because they say in the book that it looks like a giant rook,
Yeah.
which is like a tower.
Yeah, like
I understand
the
it
chess
correctly.
piece,
Yeah.
which is like a tower, like a.
But I didn't really think it looked like that in the movie.
No, not really. It is kind of
Like it's tower shaped.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like a tower. I didn't think.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was fine, and I guess I just wasn't paying attention enough when I saw the exterior of
I thought it looked more like a lopsided silo.
Fair enough.
That's my hot take on the Lovegoods house.
Fair enough. They cut this moment, which I had to include because it's one of my favorite Hermione moments in the whole series. They're arguing with basically Lovegood's telling him about the Hallows and all this sort of stuff, and he's like, oh, no, this exists. And Hermione's like, no, this doesn't exist. Oh, actually, this is before even the Hallows. This is when they're talking about the crumpled horn Scornack, I think.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Because she's explaining that this big horn they have on the wall isn't a rumpet horn, which is like super dangerous. He's like, no, it's a crumpled horn Scornack horn or whatever.
Can I just side note real quick? I love all of the creatures that the Lovegoods believe in because they all sound like Dr. Seuss creatures.
Yeah. I think very, very clearly intentionally.
Yeah.
But they have this argument, and basically Lovegood says, Xenophilius says something along the lines of like, well, nobody's proved that it doesn't exist. And Hermione says, you could say anything exists if the only basis for believing it is that nobody proved it doesn't exist. And this is wrote, oh, Hermione, be still my skeptical heart. Because I love Hermione the skeptic as it's an ideology I'm fond of. And I think she does a fairly good job in this series of being the consummate skeptic. And that line in particular, I thought was good, and I wish they'd had it in the movie, but they don't. So.
I get that. Although I also think, like, at this point in the series, you'd think she'd be more like, okay, well, a lot of weird shit does exist, so maybe this is possible.
Fair enough. Not that it's not possible, but that point still stands.
I know. I
just
didn't
because
say it didn't.
if all you can say is that nobody says it can prove it doesn't exist, that's not a good basis to believe it does. But yeah. Anyways. In the context of the book, it's not necessarily, but just as a standalone line, I like it.
And I'm talking more along the lines of like her insistence that like the Elder Wand can't exist.
Right.
It's like, okay, we're in a universe where people can rip pieces of their souls out and put them into an object.
Yeah.
Why not an all-powerful wand?
I still think that even in that universe, you still should remain skeptical to things like that seem incredibly like... and she comes along pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Once she starts getting more evidence and more, she changes her beliefs with accordance to the evidence, which is what I believe you should do. It doesn't mean just because you're skeptical of something doesn't mean you're like, no, can't, no. Like, she does eventually go, yeah, all right, fine, sure. Yeah, this probably exists. I believe you. But yeah, I think a tempered skepticism at the thought that this thing from a kid's story is a real thing, like, yeah, should probably be a little skeptical of that.
So we miss a couple little things in the Lovegood scene that just didn't make it into the movie. At one point, the core three are all talking about which...
The Hallows.
The Hallows. They talk about which one
they would pick.
They all say a different one.
Yeah.
And Harry immediately says he would choose the stone, which killed me.
Yeah. So of course, because the stone, as in case you're unaware, is the item that allows you to bring people back from the dead.
Yeah.
In the lore.
In a manner of speaking.
In a manner of speaking. Again, it's ultimately it's a cheap life, but a half life, or whatever. It's not quite, but still, Harry in his desperation to have any of the loved ones he has lost back is like fucking right.
Yeah, the stone immediately.
I've literally lost almost everybody I love. So,
and then Hermione gets off a great burn on Ron. Because Ron he says he would want the wand.
Yeah.
The Elder Wand, the undefeatable wand.
Yeah, because again, he's power hungry and insecure.
He's insecure, yeah.
Not power hungry.
But he makes the argument that it would be just fine if you could keep your trap shut about it. And Hermione's like, yeah, Ron, but could you keep your trap shut?
I know.
Fucking got him.
For real. I was like, Ron said that. I'm like, Ron, that is one of the least self-aware things you've ever said. Do you know who you are? You're not keeping your trap shut. And
then there was another sexual innuendo in my good Christian Harry Potter books.
Yeah.
Hermione says, some wizards just like to boast that theirs, meaning wands, are bigger and better than other people's.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They do.
Yes, they do. This sucks. I can't believe they cut this out. Again, I just love Luna in general, and I think her portrayal in the movies is one of the best things about the movies. She's not in it enough, but it's fine. And she's actually in it a fair amount relevant compared to the books. But they go up to her room when they're in the Lovegood house, and they go into her room, and I thought they did in the movie, and you thought this as well. They just don't go to her room in the movie.
Yeah, while I was reading that, and I was thinking, like, I feel like I remember that they didn't do justice to her room.
Yeah.
So I made a note about it.
And yeah, it's not in the movie
It's not in the movie at all.
But the best part of it, and the thing that's the sweetest moment of it, and I think it would have been a really easy thing to include one quick second of that would have upped the stakes of Luna being not there. Like, remind us why we care about Luna so much in that moment, and why Xenophilius cares about her so much. I mean, obviously it's his daughter, but but they go up to her room and they see that she has hand painted, not magically, has hand painted a mural on her ceiling that is portraits of of Harry, Hermione, Ron, Ginny, and Neville. Mm-hmm. And it has like this gold ribbony looking stuff running between all of them, and when he looks closer he realizes it's the word friends over and over and over again, and it's like the sweetest thing in the whole world. Like, she's just so happy to have friends, and it's just adorable, and it would have been a little moment to have, and probably maybe it's in the deleted scenes. Again, that feels like the kind of thing that when you're writing and adapting this movie, be like, that's a moment we need to have, just to have. So maybe it's in the deleted scenes, because again, it's not really plot quote unquote important, but yeah.
But it would have been nice.
I think Hermione's escape in the book is way cooler than it is in the movie.
Oh, for sure.
In the movie, the Death Eaters show up and just kind of shoot holes through they like machine gun.
Well, they show up as their smoke cells.
Yeah, they do. Again, randomly they come back as smoke Death Eaters, and they basically do like an old school gangster like shoot up, where, you know, like in a gangster movie where they roll up outside the bar or whatever, that and they like unload a bunch of machine gun rounds through the wall, and our heroes dive to the floor and crawl around to avoid the bullets. That's what happened. Literally, that's what happens in this scene. And they ultimately just end up finding each other, grabbing a hold of each other, and apparating out. In the movie, it's this super crazy thing where Xenophilius, they come in and they talk to Xenophilius, and they're like, you said Potter was here. And he's like, they're upstairs. Or he's like, he's upstairs. Just go up there and look. And they're like, you better not be lying. And he basically tells Xenophilius to go up there first. Well, because they scan the house and realize there are other people in the house. And Xenophilius comes up the stairs. Hermione obliviates him so that he doesn't remember them being there. Or what they talked about or anything like that. And then she blows a hole in the floor so that they fall through down to the first level. So that the Death Eaters can see that they were actually there and that Xenophilius wasn't lying.
Yeah.
And then as they're falling through the floor, she grabs them and apparate. Well, she grabs them beforehand, but as they're falling through the floor, she turns and they apparate out of the house.
And she even has the forethought in that moment to make Ron put on the invisibility cloak.
So that they don't know
he's not laid up at home with Spattergroit.
Just like, and she does all this in a matter of like 30 seconds. She comes up with this plan, and it's one of those things where it's so brilliant and so like, I really wish they would have included that. And now she's brilliant throughout the movie in all kinds of ways, but it was like that, the level of quick thinking she had to be on to put that plan together in that moment. And it just shows how thoughtful she is. She was thinking not only about getting them out of there safely, but that she didn't want Xenophilius. She was doing her best to make it so that the Lovegoods didn't get too much terrible repercussions, because she clears his memory and then makes sure they see her and them.
Yeah.
So that they don't think he was lying and then fucking kill him for lying to him or whatever. Just like, and that would have been great. But
the things we could have had.
Yeah.
So you have a note here about Harry's insistence that the Hallows are important.
This is an interesting idea, and they don't really do it in the movie much.
Yeah, well, Hallows, they don't ever get a chance to even talk about them.
They just go right on. This from here. This jumps from this moment to the end of the movie, whereas the book, we have like an extra 50 pages or something in here. Maybe not that much.
Yeah, but it's an extra little chapter where they're just hanging out camping still. Yeah.
And they're discussing whether or not they should look for the Hallows or whether or not they should go try to find the Horcruxes. And it's sort of this conflict within Harry and he wants to look for the Hallows because he thinks if I find them all, he thinks this is what Dumbledore wants him to do. And in the movie, they kind of just move right on. But it's this interesting conflict between Ron and Hermione are like, no, we got to find the Horcruxes. That's what Dumbledore told us to do. Yeah. This fact that we've kind of found these Hallows through some of the clues he left, we're not thinking that's as important as finding the Horcruxes. And Harry's like, no, we got to find the Hallows. And it's just, I thought it was interesting. I kind of get why they dropped it. But I also just kind of wander around aimlessly for a while. So again, I get why they dropped it.
Well, and I'm wondering, it's been so long since I've seen at least the beginning of part 2. I catch the end of it on TV every now and then. Yeah. But I'm wondering if they'll have any of that at the beginning of the movie. Because with the way they cut out that extra stuff in between going to the Lovegoods and then the scene with the Snatchers, and they don't have time to discuss the Hallows in the movie.
I know, but now that Voldemort has the wand, because that's the other thing, is that Harry ultimately has to decide, am I more worried about the Horcruxes or am I more worried about the Hallows? And he decides he's more worried about the Horcruxes, and that essentially kind of lets Voldemort get to the wand. Yeah. Because he thinks he could have found out where the wand was first and gotten to it. But he doesn't decide to do that. So, and that's how Voldemort gets the wand, which is where the movie ends. So, I don't know. Anyways, the only other little thing is the radio show, which they kind of have hints of the radio show throughout the movie.
But they don't ever, discuss what it is or anything.
We just kind of hear snippets of it at times of Ron listening to it. But in the movie, or in the book, it's a radio show produced by the Order, essentially. Yeah,
it's like a resistance radio show.
Where all the other news radio and stuff is all, bullshit propaganda from the Ministry, but this one radio show is real shit. But it's got Lupins on it and Kingsley Shacklebolt's on it, and it's hosted by Lee Jordan, who was the which is great. It's kind of a little moment callback to he's Fred and George's friend, who was the announcer, the Quidditch announcer from the first 2 books. But he does a radio show now. So there's a nice little moment with that. But I also thought this was a good little moment, is that they're talking about how you can help Muggles, basically. Like, go out, look, it'd be a simple thing. If you live around a bunch of Muggles, go out, cast a couple protection spells around their houses.
Yeah.
It's like, takes you no time, no effort, and you can maybe save a few Muggles. And Lupin says, well, what would you say to people who say, in a time like this, wizards first? And Kingsley's like, having none of it. Or he explains why that's a fucking stupid thing. He goes, it is a very quick and easy transition from wizards first to wizards only.
Yeah, to purebloods first. To
purebloods first.
To Death Eaters first.
Yeah. It's a very quick and slippery slope in the non-fallacious sense to wizards first to that. And I was like, wizards first? What does that remind me of? What is wizards first similar to? It's like a thing somebody says about something first. Anyways.
Gosh. Where have I heard that before?
Man, I don't know. Anyways, that's all I'm saying. Yeah, and then they get caught by snatchers.
Yeah. Except that the way the movie has them get caught by snatchers makes no sense.
Yeah.
They leave the Lovegoods and they apparate back to the forest. And they're like, okay, let's start getting set up. And then the snatchers are there. Yeah. And they all start running. And I'm like, why wouldn't they just immediately apparate somewhere else? Like, they were a few feet apart from each other.
But yeah, they could have.
But they could have just, instead of.
And they can all apparate.
Yeah.
They just do it together so that they all end up in exactly the same spot.
Right.
And Hermione's the best at it, so it's easier. But they can all apparate. They all do it throughout the book at different times, individually.
Yeah.
So if they had to, they could just all go there. But in the book, they don't have their wands, right? Or why don't they do it in the book?
Well, they don't do it in the book because the Snatchers basically come up upon them while they're in the tent. Because Harry says Voldemort. Which
accidentally, right. But I guess my idea is, then why don't they just in the tent apparate?
Because I think the idea is that they're already, they're pointing their wands at them, so even if they tried to apparate, they could probably still get... they could get stunned first, or the snatchers could get a curse off.
Or maybe they couldn't because they already put up their protective charms. Or no, wait, did they? Well, they did, but then they dropped because of the taboo.
Yeah, which the taboo is never explained in the movie.
No, taboo's not mentioned.
Yeah,
but it's funny because they do set it up. Maybe it'll come back in part 2 because they do set it up where when they get caught in the cafe, as they're leaving, Hermione or somebody goes, "How did they know we were there?" Yeah. So they set up the taboo. But they don't
ever pay it
talk
off.
about it in this one, which again, maybe that shows up in part 2. They'll explain that. Or something.
Maybe.
Anyways. Is that how they just show up in the movie. The Snatchers are they're just there.
Yeah. I guess the idea we're supposed to get is that they accidentally apparated right into this group of Snatchers, or I don't know.
I don't know.
So then the Snatchers take them to the Malfoy Manor.
Yeah, the manor.
And there's a little moment in the book, a quick mention. We find out that the Malfoys keep albino peacocks on their crown. What an asshat.
You fucking would. You would. Yeah. This is a big change. Now, they must save this for part 2.
Maybe.
They must. So in the book, Peter Pettigrew strangles himself to death.
Yeah.
With his magic hand. His magic hand strangles himself to death. He doesn't do it.
This is a callback to book 4.
Yes.
When Voldemort gives him a magical silver hand to replace the one he sacrifices to give Voldemort his body back.
Yes. But it's also a callback to 3 when Harry decides to spare Pettigrew, because Lupin and Sirius are going to kill him, and Harry says, no, don't. And basically it's an idea of, that sort of moment of...
Because Harry reminds Pettigrew when he comes down into the cellar, he reminds him, hey, I spared your life that time, remember?
Yeah, well, it's while he's killing him. So Harry and Ron jump him. In the movie, Dobby just knocks Pettigrew out.
Yeah.
In the book, Harry and Ron jump him when he comes into the cell with them and steal his wand. But as they're taking his wand, Pettigrew starts choking Harry to death. And as he's choking him to death, Harry goes, you're going to kill me even though I saved you 4 years ago or whatever. And Pettigrew stops and he has this moment of no. And when that happens, it triggers this.
So then, his hand basically turns on him.
Yeah.
And he strangles himself to death.
Yeah.
because of who he chose to align himself with, that single moment of mercy, of hesitation is his undoing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something. It's intense, and I was really like, wow, I can't believe they changed that or didn't include that.
And Harry and Ron try to stop it, even. Like, they try to pry the hand off of him, and to no avail.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, they try not to let it happen, but they can't do anything about it. And Pettigrew is just dead. Yeah. And that's the end of him. Everything else plays out. We'll talk about that in later segments. There's one line, and again, this isn't a better in the book necessarily because it's a line of it's not dialogue.
It's a line of prose.
It's a line of prose, but it's the end after Dobby dies. And Harry's sitting there with him, holding his body. There's this line that J.K. Rowling wrote, and it was super brutal, and I didn't remember it. It's beautiful, but like super dark. And I'll just read it. And then with a little shudder, the elf became quite still, and his eyes were nothing more than great glassy orbs, sprinkled with light from the stars they could not see. Like, that is...
It's brutal. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful and brutal. Yeah. Like, that's what I said. It's a brilliant line, and it's a brilliant little piece of prose, as you said. I understand why it's not in the movie. Like, right. There's not really a way to include that in the movie, unless you have a narrator, but like, yeah, just...
One little thing that I missed in the movie was that when they bury Dobby, Harry digs the grave, which is what happens in the movie as well. Yeah. But they have like a little burial service for him in the book, and everybody takes off a piece of their own clothing and puts it on him. Yeah.
Yeah, and to add on to that, which we didn't mention, we should have, is that it makes no sense Dobby's only wearing his...
Yeah, he's smock. Wearing like a pillowcase and shoes in this movie, which doesn't make any sense.
Because ever since Harry set him free, he always wears nonsense clothes all the time.
And it's just like he keeps adding clothes. Yeah. He's like always wearing like
a million layers. And just like,
he doesn't ever take the clothes off. He just keeps adding new ones.
And his favorite clothes are socks, and he always has different colored socks. And Harry gives him socks again because he's been in previous books. He hasn't been in any movie since 2, but he's been in a bunch of books since then. So it doesn't really make. And the only reason I think they kept him in his like white smock, it is cleaner, I think, but like is so that it's more recognizable as like, oh, Dobby, right? I remember that from the second book, since we haven't seen him since that one. But and then I think I'm gonna put this here because I don't know, and if it is, then we'll just talk about it in the next one. But this is the moment I cried in the book, is when Harry makes the gravestone, and it says, "Here lies Dobby, a free elf."
There's a chance I could
99% sure that's at the beginning of the next movie, if I remember correctly, and I couldn't remember, but I just wanted to mention it in case it's not, because if it's not, how dare they? But I think it is. So that's it.
We'll come back to you on that one.
That's it for Better in the Book. Again, not so much a lot of better stuff. It's just some stuff they left out. Not a ton of like big changes.
It's a lot of little details and lines and things that you wish would have been in the movie.
Yeah, but not huge changes or anything like really terrible. So let's move on to Muggle Questions Part 2.
I wrote down this question, and then I listened to your last episode on the Half-Blood Prince, and you answered it there, so you don't necessarily need to answer it again. This is completely up to you. Where did Bill Weasley come from? Where has he been this entire time?
Oh, boy. So we've alluded to this. We've talked about this a little bit. This Bill Weasley and his relationship with Fleur Delacour has been set up literally since book 4.
Yeah.
He just hasn't been in...
any of the movies. He's been in book 4, book 5, book 6, and now book 7. Maybe not 5.
The movie tries to squeeze a bunch of like background info that they've been leaving out of the movies up to this point into like an approximately 20-second exchange before they leave Privet Drive. Yeah. But clearly it did not work because Trevor was like, wait a minute. Yeah. What?
Yeah. They show up and they're like, hey, by the way, Bill Weasley. Nice to meet you, Harry. I'm Bill. This is my... I'm married.
You remember Fleur?
You remember Fleur? We're getting married in like a week. This scar? Fenrir Greyback did that to me. Moving on.
Oh, and also Lupin and Tonks are together now.
And they're having a baby.
Ooh.
Yeah. They like slam that all into 30 seconds, and that's been stretched out and piecemealed to us over the course of 4 books or 3 books. So yeah.
So yay for that.
Yeah, and Trevor did mention that he kind of got the answer to this in the last episode. He wrote these before he listened to that. Yeah. So, again.
Does the book go into any reasoning why Kreacher is so prejudiced against mudbloods?
Kreacher is prejudiced against mudbloods because Kreacher was raised by was the house elf for the blacks.
Yeah.
And the blacks were notorious, racist, pureblood garbage. Their family motto is always pure.
Yeah.
So... yeah, he just basically been indoctrinated into hating mudbloods and being super obsessed with being pureblood and all that sort of the thinly veiled analogy for racism in this book. Not thinly veiled, the very obvious and intentional analogy for racism in this book.
But it's through Kreacher is one of the ways that we get that idea of that you're taught to hate.
Yes,
It's a learned thing.
And that you can learn not to.
Yeah, and
which he kind of starts to.
He learned that from his family, and he starts to unlearn it with his new family.
Yeah. Yep.
Did I miss something on why Kreacher obeys Harry so easily? The movie really didn't explain it.
This is a dark thing. When Sirius died, Kreacher passes into Harry's ownership. We mentioned that Sirius willed all of his worldly possessions to Harry. So that means that Kreacher is bound to serve Harry by... they keep calling it house elf law, but I wonder if it's actually wizard law.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's more of wizard law that they call house elf law.
But maybe it's been going on for so long that now they just think that it's house elf law,
right, yeah.
Kind of a thing.
Yeah. Which that's one of the things we'll talk about in our problematic things in Harry Potter episode. So the whole problem with house elves. But yeah, that's why. And also a lot of it, we talked about a little bit how it gets left out. A lot of the moments between Harry and Kreacher in this get left out. Not only is he bound to serve Harry and has to do what he tells him, on top of that, Harry starts making sort of extending olive branches to Kreacher by giving him the locket. By the first thing he asks him to do is to go find Mundungus, which Kreacher is happy to do anyways. The fact that Harry asks him to do it, he's like, sure, I want to go find that asshole and get him anyways. You're just giving me an excuse by telling me to.
Harry is able to stop thinking of Kreacher as a creature.
Yeah.
And start treating
real
him,
subtle name there, JK.
She's always very subtle, very subtle with the names. But he's able to start treating him with more humanity and empathy and compassion, and that does a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And by the time we see, and again, none of this is in the movie, but by the time we last see Kreacher in this book so far, with where we are, he has come around to being considerably amenable to them and is starting to, again, transition out of his sort of horrible ways.
Yeah.
All right, it's time. Better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
All right, we both had this one. I think it's a very positive change. I think this movie made a lot of good additions and nailed a bunch of stuff, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But here's what I want to talk about. I'll talk about it right now. I think is a good place. I remember seeing this movie with Trevor in theaters. We saw this. I think these are the first two, this 1 and 2 were the only ones I saw with Trevor in theaters because it came out while I was in college. And Trevor, I remember at the time, had no idea what was going on. Now, I don't remember how many of the previous movies he had seen, but here's the thing. This movie has pretty good critical reviews, and I think if you're paying a lot of attention and really caught up on the first 6 books or movies, this would make a lot of sense. I think this movie is maybe the perfect counterpiece or adaptation. I don't want to say perfect adaptation, but I think what this movie does really well is that if you've read the book, it does a really good job of adapting it and makes sense, and you can fill in all the holes if you've read the book, but it's also not incomprehensible if you haven't. Some of the elements of 4 and 5, you're like, how would you follow this?
Yes.
If you haven't read the book, this would be tough to follow, but it doesn't not make sense. And the plot isn't wait, what? Like really convoluted and like weird. Like you get it. Like they're searching for the Horcruxes. They got to find them, you know. And that Trevor, did it again. He said, I can keep wanting to call Trevor Harry. Trevor didn't have a million questions in this one. It seemed like he was able to somewhat follow it. But there is a lot where it's like, there's a lot. And again, it's the little things they left out that you can fill in with the book. And so I think it's a really spot on adaptation. And I remember liking part 1 and part 2 of this one a lot more than some of the previous ones. And it reminded me a lot more of movie 1 and movie 2, where they were a lot more faithful. Again, partially because they were able to split it into 2 movies. Not partially, a big part because they were able to split it.
I think they gained a lot from that decision.
Being able to split it into 2 movies. But one of the things they added was we get to see Hermione, in the movie, obliviate her parents.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later. That's not what happens in the book. She says in the book, she just tells us she modified her parents' memory and told them all. And again, we get more info on it in the book. Again, which kind of to my point that if you've watched the movie, you're like, oh, that's really good. Really cool to see her. Not cool, like really heartbreaking and a great moment to see Hermione memory charm her parents and then her, fading out of the pictures and all that.
All the pictures disappear.
Very visually, heartbreaking and that sort of thing. And it's a good counter or a good visual point to what we get in the book, where we get all the backstory in the book and like what she's doing and all that. But it's just sort of relayed as like her telling Harry what she did.
Yeah.
And it's good in the book. It's effective because she's using it as a counterpoint to Harry, Harry's like, you guys haven't given up any, he's kind of like saying, you guys can't come. And they're like, yeah, we're coming. I fucking got rid of me from my parents' memory. So if you think I'm not coming, I'm coming. Like I've given up a lot for this. But yeah, seeing it's really, really nice. So. And I think in general, the acting in this one is among the best in the whole series from the main cast.
Yes.
They all have grown into very good actors by this point, and it's some really great scenes here and there.
So the book starts out with the scene with Voldemort. And all of
which
the
was the
Death
second
Eaters
scene in the movie.
Gathered. Yeah, the movie starts out with different short scenes of those core 3, and
vignettes.
I think that was a really good choice to start with them instead of Voldemort.
We talked about this in 6.
Yes,
same thing happened. Where in the book 6 starts with Snape going to do
it starts with the 2 ministers.
Right, with the ministers, but then after that it goes to Bellatrix and Narcissa going to talk to Snape, and that's kind of a similar thing to how this book starts with them at the Malfoy Manor. The movie switches and says, let's see our
let's see our heroes first. Let's
remember
see our
where
main
they're at.
Characters.
Set them
then
up a
we'll
little.
Bounce over here to the bad guys for a minute.
Yeah, I agree. During the chase scene, which we talked about at length, I think they made a pretty good decision to have most of the chase between Harry and the Death Eaters on the motorcycle happen down on ground level. Because visually there's just more stuff going on. I think it would have been really hard to do up in the air. Yeah. You don't get nearly as the sort of same feel for speed and that sort of thing. When you're up in there's no reference point as much. Although they do a pretty good job when they first burst through the clouds and like there's just chaos and stuff going on. But in terms of like the chase scene and that sort of stuff, when you're on the ground and there's stuff flying by, it amplifies the sense of speed. And like sort of like nail biting.
We got to have like this crazy drive like through a tunnel, and there's all this traffic, and they're swerving to avoid traffic. So we kind of got like a Fast and Furious chase scene in our Harry Potter
and it's like
movie.
Cars flipping, and I thought it was cool. And also, I think one of the things it kind of establishes, maybe more subconsciously, is that to some extent, the Death Eaters don't give any shit about Muggles like seeing what's going. They're after Harry. They don't care what sort of random other chaos, because a couple people probably died in car accidents during that. There's like trailers flipping over and cars crashing and that sort of thing. And we get more of this in the book of reports of Muggles being killed, and we get a little bit in the movie. But I think that's sort of a good way to establish like, oh, the rules are kind of off. We're not worried about whether or not Muggles know any of this is going on. We're at the end game here. Like they'll fucking deal with that later. They don't care. Like it's whoever sees it sees it.
So we talked about Hedwig at length earlier, so I don't think we need to rehash all of that.
But we did save this part for.
But you had this in better in the book. I hardline disagree. I like that the movie let Hedwig have a moment. I like that she didn't die trapped in a cage.
I agree. No, here's the thing. When I say my heart likes this better. But there is, and I talked about it, I don't want to get it. There's something about how brutal it is in the book that I appreciate. Yeah. I like this better. I like Hagrid having a moment attacking a Death Eater to kind of try to protect Harry and then getting caught with a spell. Like, I like that more. It's more interesting, but there's just something I appreciate about the brutal nature of what happens in the book for its own thing. But yeah, I 100% agree. I like this more. So this is a fun thing. So in the movie, they say Hedwig. Harry goes. They were like, "How did they know you were the real Harry?" And Harry goes, "I think it was Hedwig. Like gave me away." Because after they kill Hedwig is when they go away, and then Voldemort shows up.
Yeah.
And this is an internet speculation thing that in the book. So in the book, Hedwig dies right away. She's in her cage, and as soon as they get up into the crowd of Death Eaters that are around them, Hedwig gets hit with a spell and dies, or gets hit with a Avada Kedavra and dies. There's people on the internet like to speculate, and I think these are people trying to give Snape way too much credit, but that Snape was the one who did this, that Snape was there, which we never get any confirmation that Snape was actually there or not, I don't think. But the idea is that Snape was there, and he killed Hedwig so as to keep other Death Eaters from realizing that was the real Harry. But now, aren't there... Because they don't have stuffed... They don't take stuffed... Hedwigs with them, do they?
I think there is a mention of having
fake Hedwigs.
Fake Hedwigs.
Yeah.
But there's fake Hedwigs and there's real Hedwig.
Yeah, and the real Hedwig would be more obvious.
Yeah.
You would think. So anyways, that's the idea, is that Snape did it to keep the other Death Eaters from realizing that's the real Harry. That's fan canon, so
I mean, I could see him as the pet killer.
That's fair. Yeah, that makes sense. Him killing. Yeah. It fits right in line with if he could come up with some sort of noble justification for
some
killing.
Some kind of noble justification for being a sadistic motherfucker.
That's perfectly up Snape's alley. I changed my mind. That is right up his alley. Oh, I get to torture these kids for 7 years because I have a noble purpose. Yeah, okay. Cool. For more on that, tune into our Problematic Things About Harry Potter episode.
There's a scene in the movie where Harry tries to leave the burrow, tries to kind of sneak away, which is not in the book.
Yeah.
Ron stops him, and Ron has a line that I love. He says, "We wouldn't last 2 days without her," meaning Hermione.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "You damn Skippy, you wouldn't."
Because, basically Harry's like, "Well, we can just go." And he's like, "We can leave without Hermione. Are you fucking kidding?" And I was like, "Yeah, you guys, come on. You'd be done."
Yeah.
The cafe scene, I think, is we'll talk about later. But there is the oblivious diner worker, which is fun.
Yeah, I loved that though, where she's got her headphones on and she just has no idea what's happening.
And you can tell from the moment she's introduced in the scene that she just does not care. Like it's like 11 o'clock on like a Saturday night, and she's like just waiting to get off in an hour or whatever, and she has her headphones in, and there's this chaos behind her. That's a kind of a movie trope, but it's still fun. So the Ministry officials, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, are literally dressed, not officials, but the Ministry, like, police. Like the Muggle rounder-uppers, whatever they are. The people basically dragging Muggles out of the courtroom and into the courtroom. Their costumes are literally just like a different color palette of Nazi costumes. Yeah. They are the Gestapo, essentially. They're just, like, black with, like... red arm, not red, they're slightly different, I don't know, whatever, but they're basically just brown suits or whatever the right, is it brown suits? Anyways, yeah, they're just Nazi costumes. They're basically just Nazi outfits. So, and again, I say better in the movie because there's no real mention to what any of those people look like in the book. Yeah,
we don't
just kind of extrapolated from some of the other discussion we get about what's going on.
There's also a subtle thing that happens in that scene at the Ministry.
Yeah.
The new minister, Thickness, I guess is how you say his name.
Yeah, Pious Thickness is how I always...
Pious Thickness.
Which is a fucking gross name. If there was a wizard porn star...
it would be Pious Thickness. He introduces himself as the minister for magic instead of the minister of magic.
Yeah.
A subtle linguistic change, but a meaningful one.
We talked about Yeah, I would think it was a good idea. Generally,
skipping Lupin
coming, and because they have a big fight, and it's like it's interesting, but it's a downer. Like when we already have a lot of downers, it's because basically Lupin volunteers to come with them and like abandon his baby essentially, and they're like, and Harry fucking loses
flips his shit,
and it's just it's just kind of a downer.
It's kind of a downer, and there's not really like it's not super important later in the book even. So
no, and especially with what happens, that just kind of it's even more of a downer. Like.
So the movie has Dobby help apprehend Mundungus. He shows up with Creature, which doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah,
and it's not really a better thing. I'm pretty sure this does not happen in the book.
What am I thinking of? There's a moment where Creature and Dobby both show up.
You're thinking of book 6.
Thinking of the fight. I think
you're thinking of book 6 when they're following around Malfoy. That's what you're thinking of. Oh, and they get into a fist fight.
Yes, that is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the movie almost sort of moves that, but not really.
Not really.
They
but
have
kind
Dobby
of.
help get Mundungus, which, like I said, it doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no real reason that he would be helping him do that. And the movie kind of like hand waves it away.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's better than what the book does. But I do think it's a good choice considering that Dobby was left out of movies 4 through 6.
Well, they had to do it.
Yeah.
They had to because
they
otherwise
have to remind us of who he is.
Yeah. If he shows up at the end of this movie and we haven't seen him at all since movie 2, we'd be like, wait, what?
Yeah,
at least
we'd be like, who is this?
Yeah. So they had to add that because we don't see him in the book, right? Until the end. Or do we? Maybe once.
No, we don't see him until Malfoy Manor in the book.
Right. But since we've seen him in every movie since 2, or every book since 2.
Yeah, we need that reminder.
We need that reminder. I like this scene. It's a little one, but I don't think it makes sense in the book because at this point Hermione knows, because she's read about in the book, she's read that's the banned books from Dumbledore's office about how to destroy Horcruxes.
Yeah, so she knows they can only be destroyed
very few
very
things,
specific ways.
They don't even know exactly what all of those things are, but they know it's very few things. But the scene in the movie I thought was interesting. If you assume they don't know that, which we don't see in the movie, they get the locket. Once they finally get the locket, there's the scene of them like shooting spells at it and trying to destroy it, and it's like making weird noises, and like Harry like just is blasting it over and over again. I think it's a cool scene or like a fun scene, and again, it only makes sense in the context of the movie because again, in the book they know that wouldn't work. They still might try it even if they thought that, you might as well give it a go, even if your book says they can only be destroyed. I'm like, I'm still gonna try lighting it on fire and see what you know what I mean, like. So
give it the old college try.
Well, let's just see. I mean, it's not, what's it hurt? It's not like, what's it hurt to give it a shot?
Another thing that the movie adds that we couldn't have possibly had in the book is the noises that the Horcrux make.
Very subtle, like...
It's like these weird screechy clicks.
Yeah, kind of like insecty.
Yeah,
like,
that are really like unsettling. And it did get annoying.
At times.
After a while.
Especially the pitch of it.
I think I like looked at you and I was like,
Yeah, there was one moment in particular where it went on for like 15 or 20 seconds of like a high pitched like, and it was a little.
But the thing that.
But
it's an interesting technique because it does not let you forget that the Horcrux is around.
That's the thing. It's intentionally annoying.
Yeah.
You're feeling in that moment at least a little bit. It's one of those things where if they can do that, and if you can appreciate why they're doing that, in that moment, you're feeling a little bit of what the characters are feeling.
That kind of agitated.
Yeah.
And but there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. And that's exactly what they're feeling. And if you can, that can be very frustrating as a moviegoer, unless you can sit and think about why you're like, oh, I get it. Yeah. Oh, I get it.
Like,
I get why
Why does the filmmaker want me to feel this way? What is the purpose of making me feel this way? And if there is a purpose to it,
and it makes sense,
like there is here, then that's a good choice.
Yeah. Oh, and they don't abuse it too much.
Yeah.
They don't. Because even that being said, it's still a movie. If it was as annoying as it was for them, it would not be enjoyable. But a little bit of it to kind of put you on edge in the same way is it's great.
So there's also a scene where there are some random snatchers.
It's not random. The only snatchers we see in
Are
them,
they the same
it's
ones?
the same guys, yeah.
I didn't even
It's
realize
that one
it was
guy.
The same ones.
It's that one dude with like the scarves who looks like he should be in a band.
Yeah,
The guy who catches them at the end.
He looks like he should be in like My Chemical Romance or something.
I can't remember his name. He's in the book. He's the guy with Greyback.
Yeah.
Now, in the book, they're more explicitly kind of Death Eaters. Well, there's an interesting whole storyline about, or not storyline, little mention the fact that Greyback's not actually a Death Eater because they won't let him be a Death Eater because he's a werewolf,
yeah.
And their whole pureblood thing. So he doesn't actually have a dark mark, and it's kind of an interesting like little wrinkle that I wasn't expecting because it made it seem in book 6 that he was just a Death Eater. Yeah. But in this one, it's like, kind of. They let him.
They let him wear the robes,
yeah,
but he's not actually in the club.
He's not in the club because they're
racist garbage.
Yeah.
But at any rate, there's a scene where the Snatchers are wandering around and they walk right up to Hermione and they can't see her
because
or
of the
detect
enchantments
them at all.
that they put up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can smell her perfume though. But why was she wearing perfume on the camping trip from hell?
For Ron? I don't know.
Right. It seems un-Hermione-ish to me.
Oh, I agree. It absolutely seems un-Hermione-ish, for sure.
We talked about the sword.
Yeah, we talked about the sword scene. It's kind of complicated in the book. It's a little simplified in the movie. I'm just not sure it makes sense in the movie, but we'll see.
We'll see if it pans out in part 2.
I actually kind of like the dancing scene. I think that's a kind of a controversial scene among people. Here's the thing. There were little moments throughout this book that this is the first time I think I've reread the book since seeing the movie, maybe. Because I think I read this like twice or 2 or 3 times before the movie came out. And then I don't know if I've read it since then. And there were little moments on this time because I remembered the dancing scene. I remembered that was a thing. Because, again, it was kind of controversial. Like, people hated it. People liked it, whatever. And there were little moments once Ron leaves between Harry and Hermione that I feel like the movie kind of... The screenwriters took and condensed. There are little things that happen over the course of the 2 months or whatever, or the month that Ron's gone or whatever. These little things here and there, and I'll try to find a couple of them. But that I think that they kind of extrapolated out into this dancing scene that I think is actually kind of sweet. I don't love that the dancing scene happens right after Ron leaves.
Yeah.
It's a little like...
It's cute. It's a cute scene, but it comes off to me as like love triangle-y, confusing.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a problem with the love triangle thing. I think a couple 16-year-olds in such an emotionally charged situation who... where hormones are raging, like I don't hate the sort of, it's not, I think it's as love triangle-y as the book is. I think there's just as much insinuation in the book that sort of makes it feel love triangle-y, and then both the movie and the book basically go, no, she's like a sister to me. But you can read it both ways. When it's hormonal teenagers that aren't related, you can read these sort of things numerous ways. The one in the book that I have a note of here, but I know there's at least 2 or 3 other ones, is that there's a moment where after his wand breaks, Harry says, "Thanks for the tea. I'll finish the watch. You get back in and warm up." She hesitated but recognized the dismissal. She picked up the book and then walked back past him into the tent. But as she did so, she brushed the top of his head lightly with her hand. He closed his eyes at her touch. And then it goes on from there. But
yeah,
there's little things like that throughout that I feel like they kind of took those moments. And again, there's a couple other ones that I can't remember. One of them's in the graveyard where he's holding her very closely, and like she puts her head. I think he even says she puts her head on his shoulder. If not, he's holding her around the waist and she's holding him. And you can read these as siblings or as romantic partners, and they're not sure what those feelings are. And again, it's so emotionally charged. It's so they're also have the locket there, so they're just like they don't know what's going on. I think it works. I actually kind of like it. And again, if you're not going to do the little moments over the space, which you can't because it's a movie and you kind of condense all this stuff. I think that scene works. I think it just would have worked a little better, slightly more removed from when Ron runs away.
Yeah.
So that she's not quite as... She's still distraught, but it's not like quite as fresh of like Ron literally left like the night before or whatever. And then at least it's what it seems like in the movie. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, but I like the scene. I'm a fan of the scene. And I think they act it pretty well and do a good job with it. And I think it's fun and awkward and cute in a way that sort of encapsulates the dynamic in the book. I don't know if people appreciate all those little... I didn't notice these the first time I read it, but there's at least a handful of moments where I was like, okay, I can see why they got that out of that. Mm-hmm. And it's not love triangle, but there's like a...
I guess to me, the dancing scene reads more strongly romantic, whereas the little moments in the book can read like you said, like romancy or sibling-y. I guess to me, the dancing scene reads a little more strongly romantic.
See, to me, it didn't. If they had just like slow danced, sure. But they were like laughing, doing like swing dancing kind of, to where that didn't feel... The way they did the dancing scene could have leaned it one way or the other for me. But the way they did it in the movie felt... And I think they do ultimately end up kind of embracing and slow dancing a little bit. But it felt... It worked for me. I don't know. It felt right on the line of like romantic versus sibling, and even they're not sure what this is, like how they feel about each other, which I think would make sense for them in this scenario at their age.
No, and I do think it's a cute scene, and it is a much needed kind of moment of levity.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. This was a huge and very good change for the movie. Again, they don't need to do this in the book because we're reading it.
Yes.
We're not seeing it. But when they go to Godric's Hollow, in the book, they take Polyjuice Potion.
Yeah.
So that they're different people.
Yeah, they look like a middle-aged
random couple or something. In the movie, when they get to Godric's Hollow, Hermione has a line, and I appreciate them putting this in there, where she goes, I still say we should have used Polyjuice Potion. Mm-hmm. And that's an allusion to the book where they do use Polyjuice Potion. But I think I'm really glad they changed it. And I think, one, the movie does a good job of sort of explaining it away. And I think the way they explain it away is also the reason it works and is important for the movie. In that Harry, when he gets there and she says, I still say we should have used Polyjuice Potion. Harry goes, this is my first time coming home. I'm not going to be somebody else.
Yeah.
And now, you can understand that emotional motivation for Harry. Like, he's coming and seeing his parents' grave, and he doesn't want to be wearing somebody else's face. Like, he's like, this is very important to me. And two, that's the same reason we need it not to be some random middle-aged guy.
Yes.
If this moment, if Harry at the gravestone with Hermione looking at his parents' grave was some random middle-aged couple, even if we knew, quote unquote, it was Harry, it would not remotely have the emotional weight that the scenes do in the movie. Like, imagine imagine some random middle-aged dude walking up to the wreckage of Harry's house.
No, I agree.
I know you agree. I'm trying to express to the listeners why I think this is such a very important change, and why anybody who would potentially be like, oh no, they can't change that, they got to use Polyjuice Potion because that makes them say whatever. Like, whatever you read, like, just think about the emotional impact of seeing Harry, literally seeing Harry looking at his parents' grave, and Daniel Radcliffe, Harry, looking at his parents' grave, or looking at the wreckage of his family or his parents' house and that sort of thing, versus some random actor.
Right, because does it make sense for them to use Polyjuice Potion?
Sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure.
But whereas with a book, we're reading it so we can still have that emotional weight, even though they don't look like themselves. A movie has to worry about that visual.
Yeah.
We don't have the inner monologue from Harry, so we have to get the emotional weight from somewhere else. It has to come from the visuals.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think the movie does a fairly good job of making me believe that even though they know it's not the best idea, Hermione says we should have taken Polyjuice Potion. Harry, sort of, as we know Harry is wont to do emotionally, and sort of decides, no, this is what I'm doing. We know that that's within Harry's character. You know what I mean? That's within his character to make a brash, not the smartest decision for emotional and sort of gut reasons. So I think it works. I think it's a smart change.
After Ron shows back up, the scene where Harry refuses to give Hermione her wand back because she's threatening his life.
Yeah, she's beating him up, and then she asks Harry for a wand so she can curse him or whatever, and Harry's like, no. No,
and like
false.
Stumbles backwards from her.
Yeah, it's pretty great. We'll talk a little more about that scene later. The score, we mentioned in the prequel episode that the score was done by Alexandre Desplat. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I just butcher the French on it every time because he's French, I'm pretty sure. It's Desplat. I thought the score was amazing. Maybe my favorite so far. I mean, obviously the Hagrid's theme and some of those are iconic. Hagrid's theme. I'm sure he has a theme, but I don't know what it is. Hedwig's theme and some of the more iconic John Williams, incredible. But I think the overall score of this one might be my favorite so far. As I was watching the movie and the way it worked, it just worked really well throughout the film, moving the action along. And I could see this being a tough film to score with the way it sort of plays out. And I thought it was just brilliant. I thought it was beautiful, which I expected, to be fair, with how much I appreciated his other work so far. Yeah. But yeah, I thought it was really, really good.
So the three brothers, the story of the three brothers when they're at the Lovegood.
And this is notoriously this is a universal acclaim for this, pretty much. And we will echo that.
Full stop. I think this might be one of the best things in any of the movies, is the sequence.
I don't disagree, yeah.
It's creepy, it's aesthetic, it reflects the tone and the mood of the movie perfectly.
Yep.
And it's interesting. Like, imagine if we had just been watching them react to her reading the story aloud the whole time. Yeah. Boring.
Or if it had been a live action type of thing, some sort of stylized live action recreation. I just imagine, it looking like something from a Tim Burton movie and it not really working in that way. But but
the way they did it, and the fact that I'm glad that you mentioned that about having it possibly be like live action, because by making it an animation, it reflects the idea that it's a story.
Yeah.
Like it's a storybook for children.
And it very much looks, the aesthetic is similar to something sort of almost like ink and page, like the yellow background, sort of a page parchment-like. And then the black, all the figures being black and stuff, almost like ink,
or like shadow puppets.
Or shadow puppets,
It reminds me of Lottie Reinger, I think might be how you say her name. She did like shadow puppet, like stop motion cutouts of fairy tales. I'll
Sounds
show you
cool.
sometime.
Yeah.
Walt Disney gets all the credit all the time for doing the first full-length animated feature, but it was actually her.
This next point that you have is the thing I mentioned in the prequel. Did you think that was the thing I mentioned in the prequel? When I said that there was a moment in the Bellatrix torturing Hermione scene that the two of them came up with.
Oh, you did say that. No, well, I knew that they had added this, but I didn't know if that was the thing you were talking about.
It is. This is the thing that, so in that scene, it's an intense scene, but Bellatrix tortures Hermione she wants to know where they got the sword from.
Yeah.
Is the basic premise. And in the movie, she carves the word, and we don't see it happening, but we see it, the aftermath of it, and she carves the word mudblood into Hermione's arm. And that is the moment that they came up, that apparently the two actresses came up with in the, like, when they were talking about this. I don't know. At some point during the production process or filming, they came up with the idea that they should do that. That wasn't like in the screenplay or anything like that. So, and that was an actress addition.
Well, it's a really good
ad. It is. It's a very good addition, and it's a really dark, disturbing addition. I mean, that scene's disturbing already, but then to see that, it's intense. Like it's and this movie is PG-13. Most of them have been PG, but this one is PG-13, and I think pretty much primarily for like thematic and scary sequences or whatever like that.
That's probably why we only get a little trickle of blood from it, whereas in real life it would probably be bleeding pretty profusely, I would think.
Yeah, maybe not too bad because it's pretty shallow, but yeah, it would probably be bleeding a little more than it is. They used up their blood allotment for George's ear.
And Ron's shoulder, his shoulder splinch.
We'll talk about. We both have this point.
And Dobby has the best line ever.
Maybe it's up there again with the best additions line-wise. We've had every movie has like one or two really good additions that weren't in the book that they add for the movie, but this one is up there. And it's when Dobby drops the chandelier, which is what happens in the book. He drops the chandelier on Bellatrix as she's threatening to kill Hermione.
Yeah. And Bellatrix says something to the effect
How
of,
dare you? How
dare you? You could have killed me, or you tried to kill me, or something like that.
And Dobby says, Dobby never meant to kill, only to maim or seriously injure. Which is fantastic. And it's even better because in the Dobby voice.
Yes.
It's so delightfully silly, but like badass at the same time. It's a brilliant line, and not in the book. And the kudos to whoever added that to the script. And my last one for better in the movie is in the book when Dobby dies, and it's great. It's heartbreaking. But when Dobby dies in Harry's arms, he just says Harry Potter, and then that's it. In the movie, they give him a couple lines. Yeah. And I don't remember the exact context or the exact lines, but he says something about Dobby is happy to be with friends, to be with his friend Harry Potter. Or I think he says Dobby is happy to be with his friend, and then Harry Potter is still the last thing he says, so they keep that from the book, but they give some more before it, where he gets a little bit extra to kind of express. It's similar to the Hedwig thing, where it's in the book it's a little colder and a little darker, where he just says Harry Potter and dies, and we don't know what he was gonna say or what his, like we don't know, like was that Harry Potter I'm so terrified, or was that Harry Potter I'm happy to be here, like I'm happy I saved, you know what I mean? The movie gives us that slightly more positive read of that to, you know what I mean, like a slightly happier read on that scene, whereas the book leaves it a little more ambiguous. It could go in kind of, numerous directions, which I like, but my heart likes the happier moment from the movie. So that's it for better in the movie. Let's do Muggle Questions Part 3.
This is probably something that will be answered in Part 2 of the movie, hopefully. But if not, just in case, I'm going to ask it now. Where did the Doe Patronus come from? Who casted the Doe Patronus that led them to the Sword of Gryffindor?
Yeah, we're going to have to skip this one, Trevor.
Yep. Spoilers.
Major spoiler alert.
Input, and now I'm not going to input it because I don't want to go find it. But, I might have it already. Doesn't matter. Input, River Song.
Spoilers.
At the end of the movie, Dobby mentioned that he can evaporate in and out of the dungeon because he's an elf. What is so special about elves that they can do that? Does the book give any detail to that?
We mentioned this earlier. But it isn't necessarily that elves are special. It's that wizards, especially racist, pureblood garbage wizards, consistently underestimate the powers of non-wizard creatures. Yeah. So Dobby can get in and out because the Malfoys and company didn't think there was any reason to protect against lowly elf magic.
Yeah. Yeah. Because for a number of reasons. One, they underestimate the ability of elves, period. Two, free elf isn't a thing. Like, elves would have to be... The idea of an elf acting of its own accord or doing something to help or, like, save, a wizard doesn't really... They don't think about it that way. It's just, they're servants. They clean things. They, an elf being heroic or doing stuff like that, they don't even think about it that way. They're house elves. They're servants. They're maids. They clean, they cook, they do, that's what they do.
But the movies ignore the themes always and forever.
I don't want to say they ignore the themes. That's not entirely fair. They definitely ignore a lot of the themes, and it's one of their biggest flaws. They do a very bad job with the themes. Absolutely do a very bad job. They, as we've discussed and been disappointed by numerous times, is that the movies they put plot ahead of themes, and I get it, but the themes suffer.
But
when you
also
do that.
the themes are super fucking important.
Kind of the most important part of Harry Potter. All right, the movie nailed it.
Nailed it.
Charity Burbage
Yeah,
floating eerily in the air.
yeah. This whole scene at Malfoy Manor in the beginning, I thought was pretty much spot on. Where Voldemort's kind of laying out what's going on, and then kills Charity Burbage, who we've never seen before in the movies or the books.
Yeah.
I think she was mentioned like once in the books. Like Hermione says she's taking Muggle studies from a wizard.
Yeah.
Like Charity Burbage. I don't even know if she mentions her name. She just says that she is.
She's the Muggle studies professor.
Yeah, which is why they kill her. Or why he captures her and kills her is because, and he lays it out in the movie too. It's just, but it's awful. It's disturbing. The way she's floating there is horrifying, and her pleading with Snape. It's all just, it's the same, like just, brutal portrayal that we see in the book. I had this better in the book because I didn't think they were going to do it. And then they had a moment where Harry has this, where he has sort of mixed feelings about leaving Privet Drive for the last time.
Where he opens up his old cupboard.
Yeah, I was really happy they included that little moment of him going in under the stairs, because that's in the book, and he goes under there and looks around, he kind of reminisces, and he hates it there, and he never wants to come back. But it's also the place where he found out he was a wizard. Well, it's not technically. It was a shack. He should have went back to the shack and and found the door laying on the ground that Hagrid knocked over. But
I think no matter how shit your childhood was, it's still your childhood.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be even a little tiny bit of like bittersweet.
Yeah. And they do in the movie, and I don't remember if this was in like the first movie, but I'm thinking maybe it was. There's these little toy figurines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
Were
he
those
plays with them.
In the first movie? I thought so. So so there's something like that where it's not necessarily, obviously the whole abusive fucking home he was in was awful, but like, he remembers this moment. Like, I remember playing with these toys. It's nice. I like that.
The 7 Harry Potters scene is
great.
amazing.
It's great.
That we both noticed that the shot where Hermione is like halfway between Harry and Hermione.
Yeah.
When she's transforming.
I was like, it's very, I was like, this better not awaken anything in me. But overall, the scene's great. It's really funny in the way it should be. There's lots of good humor. There's lots of good, the effects are great. Like the way they all, like it's a really good effect shot of them, of the Weasley twins getting shorter, Mundungus getting taller, and Hermione transform. Yeah, it's great. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but the Fred and George scene after George loses his ear, their moment together is really nice. And they have the joke about George says that he's holy.
Yeah.
He says, I'm feeling saint-like, and because I'm holy.
Get it? Holy.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole world of ear-related humor, you went with holy. And I was like, it's also not a good joke because your ear already has a hole in it. That joke applies literally always. But sure. I thought Scrimger, or however the heck you pronounce it. You hear it once, I think, in this movie. But
Hermione says it once, and I was like, there it was.
Yeah, it's not Scrimgour.
It's not Scrimgour.
It's like Scrimger or Scrimger, one of the two.
So we've just been mispronouncing it for...
Who cares? He's a jerk anyways.
Yeah, he is.
But I thought his portrayal was good and fit really well, and he has the mane of hair. And Bill Nighy's great. I love Bill Nighy. He's always fantastic in everything he's in. But yeah, I thought he was really good. And on to that, I think the Dumbledore Will scene was literally exactly how I imagined that scene taking place, with them crammed onto a couch together, and the way he gives out the items, and the look of expectation on his face when he gives Harry the snitch, and all of that I thought was just spot on, like from how I imagined it in the book.
The Lovegoods at Bill and Fleur's wedding, I thought was pretty, like the way they're dressed and the way they're like dancing. Which I
found this note when I was researching for the prequel. I didn't mention it, but I was hoping I would remember it, and I did. Luna, can't remember her name, the actress who plays Luna, who's currently on Dancing with the Stars and apparently crushing it. I think she just made it to the finals.
Nice.
She came up with that dance for them based on the description from the book. Because if you remember the description from the book, Harry says he saw Luna and her dad dancing on the dance floor and it looked as if they were trying to swat rack spurts away from their head. And if in the movie they're doing like this weird like hand waving,
I would call that cat in a box.
Yeah, it is kind of like that. But that's what they're doing, and she apparently the actress herself came up with that based on that description from the book. So
nice.
So we talked about Aunt Muriel and how she's not remotely as interesting and as sassy as real life Aunt Muriel is, or sorry, book life Aunt Muriel is real life. Book life Aunt Muriel is. But I thought this scene, which it's a tough scene because it's a relatively long scene in the book where we have a lot of discussion of Dumbledore's history and like the rumors and the
back and forth between her and
Elphias or Elphias Dodge or however you pronounce it. I can't not pronounce it Doge now because of the stupid meme, but I mean, it's spelled the same way, I think. But anyways, but I thought the movie did a pretty good job condensing that big drawn out scene into a relatively contained short scene. Again, they don't quite capture. I thought they captured Dodge, whatever, kind of perfectly with his like weird suit and his little brandy, his little cup of brandy, and his like indignation at everything happening. I thought was pretty spot on. I just think overall the scene was pretty close to, or it captured what the book was going for in a much shorter time period. We mentioned the cafe scene earlier, but it's spot on.
Yes.
It is exactly what I imagined the way they come in. I mean, they sit down in the book, but whatever. And they sit like in the thing next to them. But just how quick. I also kind of like this movie does something with the sound design that I couldn't decide if I liked or disliked. But I think I liked it where a lot of the action scenes, the music, not only the music, there's no music. The music drops out, or if there is music, it's really subtle. And the sound mix is sparse compared to some action scenes, and it reminds me of how it would actually feel if you were in that moment. You hear the spells, you hear some stuff exploding, but a lot of it's sort of subdued. And if anybody who's like an athlete or plays sports, which I'm not anymore particularly, but only once a year, but I played sports growing up, a bunch of different stuff, and when you're in the moment of a sporting event and like concentrating on what you're doing, and I imagine I was in a fight when I was in like second grade, and it's the only time in my whole life, like one fight. It doesn't really, but I can imagine in a moment like that, it would be similar, is that when you're in that moment of like supreme concentration on doing something incredibly physically demanding, and you're focusing on what you're doing physically, and in the sense and mentally, you don't hear what's going on. Yeah. Like that whole thing where the sound of the crowd drops out. That's totally true. You don't hear the crowd. You don't hear other people. You can kind of, you get selective hearing. You can hear certain things that you need to hear, but like everything else kind of goes away. Yeah. And I think the action scenes in this movie kind of went for that. And I think it actually worked pretty well.
And I think that works too. Speaking from a perspective of like, when you're in danger, when you go into like fight or flight, everything drops out too, and you kind of go into like that business mode of like, okay, this is what I have to do right now, and everything else just kind of falls away. And
that I think those are similar. It's an adrenal response. I think it's the same thing. Fight or flight. It's a very similar thing to when you're in a particularly stressful moment in a sporting event, and that's what I'm relating it to, because like I said, I played a lot of sports, so I think it's probably a very similar type of thing to what your body chemically does. And so I think that what the movie did with the sound design kind of was trying to do that, and I think it was interesting. I think it worked pretty well. No, you changed my spelling mistake, but it wasn't a spelling mistake.
What did you have?
You have here Dumbledore coming down the hallway. My note, very specifically and purposefully, was Dustledore coming down the hallway.
I did not make that connection.
Yeah, I thought so. When they get to Grimmauld Place, Moody has put in some traps for in case Snape shows up, and the movie doesn't necessarily do a great job of explaining what that is happening there, because it would be hard to, because we get a lot of like narration kind of, but a dust figure of Dumbledore rises out of the carpet and rushes down the hallway at them whenever they come in. And I thought the movie did a good job of doing that. Did. Dusteldore.
Also, that's a solid pun. I commend you.
Dusteldore. I didn't realize you corrected my spelling mistake in the notes. Wasn't a spelling mistake.
I actually have added a lot of the Harry Potter names to my dictionary on Google Docs.
Oh, yeah. My phone now.
Yeah.
Dumbledore got added real quick because I was tired of, yeah, definitely. We both have this note, Ron and Hermione almost holding hands.
Yeah.
Which is
That's a specific mention of that.
A little thing in the book, but they do it in the movie.
And we both also had this when they flushed themselves into the ministry.
Yeah. Pretty much exactly how I imagined it.
Yeah.
As silly as you would imagine it to be.
The whole ministry scene.
The when they go undercover in
Yeah.
Polyjuice Potion to the ministry, pretty much all of it is spot on. They change things here and there, but the stuff they change works, and the stuff they don't change is really good. The wizard statue when they get into the entryway where it's this giant pillar with muggles being crushed underneath it. And once they get up to Umbridge's office, or once Harry gets up to Umbridge's office, the look of her office on the inside, but the propaganda area.
Yeah, all the creation of the propaganda. And I also loved when Harry's just kind of wandering around aimlessly as the ministry guy.
Oh.
He's just like walking like, I don't know what to do.
He's just walking very there's some great comedic moments in this whole scene, in this whole part in the ministry, but he's kind of awkwardly walking around, looking around like, I don't know. Those actors, I didn't recognize any of those actors who were playing the Polyjuice Potion version, but they were all great. The creation of the propaganda, the huge line of desks all facing Umbridge's office, and exactly how I imagined it. And it was a slight change from how I imagined the distraction device, but I thought it was a really good visualization of it. So when they leave the ministry, Ron gets splinched. We mentioned that earlier. I thought the splinch... I actually thought I was going to have this in a different section when I remembered it from when I first saw this movie, because in the book it's described as he has a big chunk out of his arm. But when I watched the movie, I actually think what they showed in the movie makes more sense and for what I imagine a splinch to be than just a chunk missing from his arm. Because in the movie, it looks like his skin is like twisted and torn, which, especially with the way they do the visual effect
with the way they visualize it, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, where they like roll up in like a big ball kind of and like...
It looks like they suck into a tube almost.
Yeah, that idea where... So then having his skin be like this weird, like twisted, turned, bleeding mess, like, looks pretty cool.
The fight with Ron.
Yeah.
And when he leaves.
Again, this is
done.
Yeah, I think this is some of all this stuff with those three. It's some of the heaviest lifting they had to do acting wise in the whole series, and I think it's some of the best they've done in the whole series. Just the argument they have, how Ron's sort of weird, passive aggressive, glum like attitude he's putting off, and Harry's indignation with it, but also like just everything about that whole interaction leading up to Ron running away, I thought was spot on, and a lot of the lines are verbatim from the book, I just thought it was brilliant. Oh, these are all my notes. I thought this was the thing because I thought they were gonna have a hard time doing this. It's a 2.5 hour long movie. I thought they did a pretty good job of showing the fact that they're wandering around aimlessly and not really knowing where to go, which is a big part of the book.
Yes.
Like it's like a big chunk of the book and that's what sort of brews all the confusion and the anger and everything.
They don't really know what they're doing.
They don't know what they're doing.
Dumbledore have like a vague idea at best.
They need Horcruxes. They need to get Horcruxes.
Yeah.
And they don't know where to find them for a long time, but then once they do find them, they don't know how to destroy it. Like once they do get the locket, they don't know how to destroy it, so they're just like kind of wandering around.
They're taking the ring into Mordor, but they have no idea which direction Mordor is.
They don't know where Mordor is. They don't know they need to get to Mount Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just wandering around. But they have to keep moving because they don't want to get, stay in one place too long.
Yeah.
And I thought the movie did a good job of showing that again in a pretty brief time period in 2.5 hours. But Bathilda Bagshot looks adequately old and gross.
Gross, and They had like the fly buzzing, which
Yeah.
was a nice touch.
Yeah. And on to that, the Nagini scene was pretty good. I imagine it a little more intense and terrifying than it is in the movie. Like a little darker, a little more horror movie than it is. There's some good stuff in it, which is why I have it here.
There's a good horrific moment, I think, where you can see the nose of the snake like poking out of her mouth.
Yeah. And where she like starts shrinking it. And like that's good. But once it becomes the snake, I expected it to be darker and more chaotic in the book. I imagined it like Harry barely knows what's happening, and it's like
very confusing.
It's very confusing to read, and so I imagined it to be more confusing. Whereas in the movie, he's just kind of like holding it at bay with a chair.
Yeah,
and like it again. Overall, the main reason I put it here is that I think it's creepy when she turns into the snake, and then I think I was super glad they had the moment because I just thought it was a cool badass moment in the book where would they get away by Hermione casting a spell and then they leap out of the window and then apparate in midair, which they do in the movie. So I was like, cool, you got that part. I'll give you kudos for it.
Everything about the doe, the sword in the lake, the destruction of the locket Horcrux. Everything
for this whole couple scenes is spot on. I think the doe looks exactly how it should. It looks like a Patronus. The lake looks cool and eerie and creepy. You can see the sword in the bottom. He breaks it open. I think the movie does it. I could have put this in better in the movie, honestly. I think with the lake being bigger and him being trapped under the ice, which isn't how it's really described in the book as much. It's like I imagined in the book, I imagined it being a much smaller.
Yeah, I imagine it more like a teeny little pond.
Yeah, because he says that it's not so deep. It's shallow enough that he would have to go all the way underwater, but like just barely. Like I imagined it like maybe 10 feet deep tops, and I imagine it not very wide. And so, but in the movie, he gets trapped under the ice, and the way the locket is like strangling him and dragging him underneath the ice, and it adds to it because the idea of being trapped under ice is terrifying and like and you know what I mean. Like that's all horrifying, and that all works really well. And then Ron showing up and not really knowing who it is because you can't really see him, and just everything about that's great. And then the whole interaction between Ron and Harry after he shows back up, and then the destruction of the locket, which it's just.
And what Harry and Hermione coming out of like the locket versions of them are pretty spot on to what they describe.
Brilliant, because literally in the movie or in the book, the line describing her, and it's true for both of them in the movie, but this line specifically as they're relaying what Hermione looks like, Riddle Hermione as they call it in the book. Hermione looked more beautiful, but also more terrible. And I was like, oh, so she's scary hot. And the Hermione that comes out of the locket and they both are. They're like, they have this weird sheen, kind of like Voldemort.
Yeah.
Like this sheen like to their skin.
Looking.
But they also are very attractive and like beautiful. But
like their features are sharper. Like they've had a lot of contouring done.
Yeah, exactly. But they're also like scary. But you like want to fuck them. Like you don't know what's going on. Yeah, I thought it was brilliant.
It's like a all shall love me in despair
moment
for Hermione.
Exactly. A little more Vogue, though.
Yeah.
And then Ron swinging the sword and crushing it. All of it. Again, there's not much else to say. It's just kind of perfect. Like the whole locket destruction scene I thought was perfect. And then Hermione beating up Ron.
Yeah.
We talked about this earlier, but she just wails on Ron for a while, which... I thought this whole scene was brilliantly acted. Ron's sort of confused mixed with like understanding and like just taking it, and Hermione's like righteous indignation at this whole thing, and her I thought just all of it was, and but also when they tell her that they destroyed the locket, the way her guard kind of drops and she's like, really? And just everything about it I thought was just brilliant. Like kudos to them and the director for getting the performance out of that, because those were really important scenes for them, and I thought they did a really good job with it.
I think this was in there almost word for word. I loved Ron's shameless and obvious support of Hermione when she wants to go to the Love Goods.
Yeah.
And she brings it up, and he's immediately like, yep,
Yep.
She's right. I agree. We should definitely do that.
We should vote on it. And then they both he raises his hand. Yeah, and Hermione looks at him like, all right, see what you're doing. I said you had us in a different place. Again, the interior of the Lovegood house I thought was spot on. It has it's adequately cluttered. It has the only thing it was missing was the printing press printing the new copies of the Quibbler that are not so kind to Harry, because he's trying to get Luna back, so he's towing the Ministry line. But the spiral staircase in the middle, the dirigible plums in the front yard, which are the things that Luna wears as earrings throughout the books. And I think we can see the Erumpent horn in the background.
Yeah, I did
we can
notice
see
that,
it.
I think.
They don't mention it. They don't talk about it, but I'm pretty sure you can see it.
And as per usual, Helena Bonham Carter fucking nails it as Bellatrix.
Yeah, always.
Just out of the park.
She crushes it. And I am happy that what's-her-name was too pregnant to do it, because one, good for her. She has a lovely child now. And also that meant Helena Bonham Carter got to be Bellatrix. Because what's-her-name's great as Narcissa. I think she plays a great Narcissa, sort of the like less crazy.
Yeah, the refined
Bellatrix, yeah.
I just want to live my nice life. Yeah. Leave me alone.
Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Yeah. I thought they weren't going to have this in the movie, but they did. Harry grabs 3 wands and casts Stupefy with all 3 at once and blasts Draco across the fucking room. Because you apparently, and this is a fun little like magic trivia thing, you can use multiple wands and get multiple.
I don't know why everyone wouldn't do that.
Right? Why don't you just carry
double wands?
Yeah, carry 5 wands in each hand. They're not that thick. Just just blowing everybody across. Like, I mean, it's fun. It's also a little silly, like, because like you said, why would you just always carry a bunch of wands? But sure, it's still fun, and I'm glad they had it in the movie. This fucking line. It gets me every time. It jokes me up, and it's so great, and it's Dobby. And it's after Bellatrix says, "How dare you? How dare you disobey your master?" I think is what she says. And Dobby says, "Dobby has no master. Dobby is a free elf." I was like, fuck. Just throw your fist in the air and get him, Dobby. And then coming down from that high, after Dobby dies, and this is in the movie or in the book, but a slightly later. It's a different place than where they put it in the movie. I think it makes more sense where they put it in the movie, to be fair, because they wait a long time to close Dobby's eyes in the book. Like, nobody thinks to close his eyes until like halfway through the funeral. But in the movie, Luna comes up as Harry's holding Dobby and says, "We should close his eyes." Or maybe she doesn't even say that. She just does it. Yeah. Maybe she like closes his eyes and says, "There, now he could be sleeping." And it's Luna's Luna, and I love her for it. So, and I the movie nailed it. Luna is just always, everything Luna does is the movie nailed it. So, all right, that's it for the movie Nail It. Let's do Muggle Questions Part 4.
After Dobby passed, Harry mentioned we're going to bury him properly without magic. I didn't know if that was just we're going to bury him without magic out of respect, or like, was there more to it than just we're going to work harder to bury him out of respect?
You know, I think Harry is grieving in this moment and feeling like burying him by magic is kind of the easy way out.
Yeah.
And to add to that, you know, I think he feels more than a little responsible for Dobby's death, and that at the very least he owes it to Dobby to get a few blisters digging a grave.
Yeah. That's absolutely what it is. He feels like it's more respectful. He feels like Dobby has earned, like it would be cheating.
Yeah.
On top of that, I'll just read this brief section from the book because I think it kind of answers the question from the book. It's exactly why. "I want to do it properly," were the first words of which Harry was fully conscious of speaking. "Not by magic. Have you got a spade?" And shortly afterward, he had set to work alone, digging the grave in the place that Bill had shown him at the end of the garden. He dug with a kind of fury, relishing the manual work, glorying in the non-magic of it, for every drop of his sweat and every blister felt like a gift to the elf who had saved their lives. So there you go.
Yeah.
I feel like I've kind of let you guys down. I don't have as many questions as I have in previous episodes, but I do have one final question before we get into part 2, which is, why did they find it necessary to split this book up into 2 movies? Was that a money choice? Was it a storytelling choice? And why didn't they do it to any of the previous books?
So the reason they split this book into 2 movies. We talked about this in the prequel a little bit, is that they basically, the producers / writer / directors were like, we have to make this 2 movies. We can't not make this 2 movies. Yeah. It was a narrative imperative, as I wrote here, because I'm clever. They didn't see a way to fit everything they needed into one movie, which I completely agree. I don't see how they possibly could have.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this movie would be, if it was one movie, it would be 3.5 hours long, and it would still be missing way too much. I mean, it's 2.5 hour movies. It's 5 hours worth of movie, and it's still missing stuff. Like, it's still missing important things. We don't talk enough about Dumbledore's backstory with Grindelwald. We don't talk about Creature enough. You know, like, there's all kinds of stuff, even still, that they don't do enough of. So they just had to. As for why the others before this weren't, I've heard it was discussed, I think, when we've done the prequel episodes, they've discussed breaking these up into 2 movies. They just ultimately never decided to. My guess as to why they didn't want to is because I'm sure it was first discussed with movie 4.
Yeah, probably.
Because that's the one where they went from 350 to 400 pages to 750 pages. Yeah. All of a sudden, we have twice as long of a book. How are we going to...
I feel like the screenwriter got book 4.
Was like, are you fucking kidding me? Yeah. My guess is they didn't want to open that bag of worms too early, because, like, if you do it for book 4, you have to do it for the rest of the series. How do you not do it for the rest of the series? Like, I think we talked about this a little bit in one of the prequel episodes. If you do it for book 4, all of a sudden you go from 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 movies?
They'd still be making them.
You go from 8 movies to 11 movies? Well, you go from 7 movies to 11 movies or something like that. If my math, or 13? I don't know. I don't care about the math. Whatever. Something like that. So yeah, they kept putting it off as far as they could. Now, in my opinion, they should have done it since movie 4.
Yeah.
I would have enjoyed it more. I get why they didn't, but yeah, I think it just ultimately came down to, like, we can't make that many movies. Yeah. So we'll just do it for 7 to make sure we give the fans what they want at the end.
And it's a lot more of a commitment to ask from all of the actors, too.
Yeah.
That many more movies. Yeah.
That's a lot more. And the studio, that's a lot more money. Every time you add another movie, that's a ton more money. So yeah, it's a huge. That's why. But they got to 7. They had made a lot of money. They go, okay, we can split this up. Give everybody maybe the satisfying conclusion they want for this without shortchanging anything.
And at some point, I feel absolutely certain that at some point, this will get adapted for television.
It will. 100% will. It 100% will. And I can't wait. I hope they do it before we die. I would think they will.
Yeah.
I would think they will.
Thanks again for having me on This Film Is Lit. I really appreciate it. If you are looking for a new podcast, my radio show, the KCMQ Morning Shag, has the Best of podcast. You can check it out, kcmq.com, or on your favorite podcasting app. Just search the KCMQ Morning Shag Best of podcast. We'll talk again for part 2.
All right. That's it for Muggle Questions. Thank you very much, Trevor. And again, happy birthday. Let's move on to general discussion.
We have a few things.
Just a couple things around this out.
Pious Thickness, our resident Wizarding World porn star. So in the book, they tell us specifically that he's under the Imperius curse.
Yeah.
Is he still supposed to be in the movie?
I can't tell. To me, he just seems like a he's guy.
There at Voldemort's gathering of Death Eaters, but then, like, there was this brief moment, I felt like, where he had like this weird look on his face where I was like, is he supposed to be Imperius?
I don't think he's supposed to be.
What's going on?
The vibe I got from the movie is that, because yes, in the book he's very much under the Imperius curse and just doing whatever they tell him. In the movie, I assume because he was at that meeting and the way he was looking, because he was like furtively looking at the snake, it was like he didn't want to be there. To me, it struck me as like a Pettigrew type thing of like a cowardly, he wasn't under the Imperious curse. He didn't really want to be working for Voldemort, but he was too much of a coward not to. It was kind of the vibe I thought the movie was going for, is what I thought was going on. But yeah, it doesn't seem to me like he's under the Imperious curse, mainly because if he was, they wouldn't need him to like sit in on the meeting. Yeah. They can just have him do whatever they want him to do. True. Without him. He doesn't need to be at the meeting to like get info, you know, like it's irrelevant for him to be there. And this is the book and the movie. Why could they not just get out of the house and then apparate when they're taking Harry out of Privet Drive? So the idea is that he says you still got the trace on you, so we have to use non-magical means to get you out of here. And I'm like, okay. And they can't apparate inside the house, I don't think, because it's under like the similar type of protections as, at least I assume that it's under similar protections as like Hogwarts and stuff, where they can't apparate or out of Privet Drive. My thought is, okay, so if he has the trace on him, and that's why you can't apparate, then, but you guys used spells all the way to, like, Harry was using spells. I know this wasn't the plan, but ultimately Harry ended up using spells all the way up until he got to, well, the burrow in the movie, but in the book it's to Tonks's parents' house. Yes. And so if he has the trace on him, they would still be able to track that, right?
Well, like, I guess, but I mean, they weren't expecting to be attacked. Right. By the Death Eaters. So I guess plans kind of change at that point. Sure. But I think your point still stands that, like, why don't they just walk down the street and apparate? Yeah, because, and so if the idea is that apparating with the trace on you means they know where you end up. Okay. If that's the idea, my question still stands in that Harry has been using the trace, or was using spells the whole time they were being chased, and basically right up until he got to the burrow / Tonks's. So could they not have tracked him based on that? I don't know. I was just very confused by that. I never took the trace to mean. Also, if that's true, the Ministry could have known everywhere Dumbledore took Harry in book 6. Because... But we've already established that the trace really makes no sense. It's not one of the stronger points of storytelling. Yeah, I mean, you get it. Like, I understand the idea behind it. If you don't think about it, it's fine. Yeah, I'm not convinced it makes a lot of sense if you think about it too hard. Yeah, all right. Thinking about it. I'm going to stop thinking about it now. I do love this. In the book, Ron bursts in on Harry and Ginny making out and scolds Harry for leading her on, even though they broke up. But in the movie, George is creeping on him, and it's hilarious. They're kissing, and he like tiptoes by and like comically tiptoes by with a toothbrush stuck in his ear. Whole thing, the hole in his head. I think it's a toothbrush. It looks like it is. Yeah, he like uses it to stash his toothbrush in. Weird. Yeah. I also kind of love Fleur's wedding dress. Apparently that was, I read this and I didn't include it in my movie notes. That was, there was like talk of suing them because it's basically a wedding dress from some collection from like a designer. Or maybe not a wedding dress, but a dress from some designer. Like a knockoff of something. And they basically took it and tweaked it. Yikes. At least that was what I'd read at numerous places on IMDb, Wikipedia, a couple places. Well, I hope it was at least a French designer. I don't know. But you can, if you want to find a dress like that, you can just look that up and find it. And it's pretty spot on. So Aunt Muriel is basically Aunt Marge. Yeah. I don't know why I say Aunt Muriel and Aunt Marge, but it feels right to me. So I'm going to. And I just love it because it's like everyone has that relative. Yeah. The Weasleys have that relative. Harry's or the Dursleys have that. Just that old, obnoxious, racist, like just awful that nobody likes. That just like but you have to put them. They have to bring them to all the parties, and you're just like, fuck. I hope. And you just do what you can to avoid them. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody has that relative. The Weasleys have it. The Dursleys have it. Everybody. This is interesting. This is added just in this book.
when Voldemort goes to kill or to interrogate Grindelwald at the prison camp, or at the prison, the other wizard prison that exists somewhere up north, like we don't know where it is, but it's not Azkaban, but he's in some prison, and Voldemort goes to interrogate him. He flies there, and then as they call him back at the end of the book because they're like, we have Harry Potter. So they call him back. Bellatrix calls him back, and he starts flying back. And Harry says, or in the inner monologue says, Voldemort will be close enough to apparate soon. And that's a new little bit of info about apparition. That's a retcon.
That's a retcon.
That's a retcon.
To give more time.
Yeah. That's 100% a retcon, because I'm pretty sure the description, I would have to go back and look in like 4 or 5 or whenever we've kind of first learned about apparating or like go into depth about it. It's you can apparate anywhere in the world.
You just have to focus on your location.
There's no mention of
rule up to this point.
There's no mention of you can apparate anywhere within 600 nautical miles. Like that's that's not how this has been described before. But yeah, that's kind of how I thought, because she realized, well, instant travel anywhere at any times
could occasionally be inconvenient.
Could be inconvenient. So we're going to take care of that one.
We've brought this up.
Yeah, I brought it up earlier.
I'm going to ask this question again. Has anyone tried killing Voldemort like the Muggle way? Like, you brought up maybe like shooting him. And I'm like, I know he's got the Horcruxes and all that, but like surely cutting his head off would at least slow him down.
Well, surely, because you would think.
I feel like it would be worth a try.
It would be worth a shot. It would be worth a shot. I don't even want to get into this right now because I just thought about this. So when Voldemort died after he tried to kill Harry, the reason he didn't die is because he had a Horcrux, right?
Yeah, because he's got Horcruxes.
I'm sorry. When you die and you have a Horcrux, it's not like an extra life token. You don't use that Horcrux. I would think that's how it would work.
No, they just keep you from dying.
Okay. So like your soul just sort of like.
So that's why he was like super duper weak and like basically didn't have a
like
body.
A ghost.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so I guess the idea is he turns into like a quasi ghost kind of a thing.
Well, in that case, I think you're right. If we fucking cut his head off, sure, he might not be dead because of the Horcruxes.
Yeah.
But it took him 4 books to get back into a body.
I'm just saying, we could go all mythology on it, chop them up into a bunch of different pieces, scatter them to the corners of the earth.
Yeah. And see, once he's dead, as long as you can handle the Death Eaters, they're the only ones trying to bring him back.
Yeah. We just root them out.
Root them out, fucking take them down. They're fine. I mean, some of them are tough.
Should have tried this the Muggle way.
Yeah.
From the very beginning.
You got the Sword of Gryffindor. Just get close to him. Cut him in half. I don't know. I mean, to be fair, it's not like it's easy to get close to him and cut him in half. I mean, acknowledging that, but...
You know what it would be like if you started chopping him into pieces, though? It'd be like the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Not dead yet. Yeah, that's true. That is, yep. Holy shit. Canon. Monty Python and the whole... Which is true, because... sort of Arthurian legend very much inspires a lot of the Merlin exists in the Harry Potter universe. The Black Knight, whatever, from Monty Python and the Holy Grail was an evil wizard who had Horcruxes.
Obviously.
It's obvious. That is canon. That has to be canon.
This is the crossover we deserve.
This is the crossover we truly deserve. Holy shit. That's brilliant. All right, moving on. We mentioned this. Dobby should be wearing more clothes.
Dobby wearing more clothes. Okay, speaking of Arthurian legend, maybe we find this out. I don't remember all of Snape's memories, but why the fuck does he put the sword at the bottom of a fucking frozen pond? What is the purpose of that?
No purpose.
Like, is it literally just so we can have an Excalibur moment? Is it not?
That is all. That is it. And it's so Ron can triumphantly, pull it from the pond.
For the aesthetic.
It is, because, yes, Snape was there. Oh, spoilers, Trevor, if you're still listening. For the things we said that were spoilers for the next one. Snape was there. He did the thing. He knew Harry was coming because he knew he was there.
Yeah.
And apparently was potentially watching this whole thing happen.
Potentially.
So if he was worried about somebody else showing up and getting the sword, he could have just, if that happened, he could have just like killed that person or stunned that person or whatever and got rid of them. And he could have just left it laying on the ground and Harry could have been like, oh, the sword, sweet. Like, other than the aesthetic, that's the reason.
So there are a couple little things that draw a clear correlation between, specifically here between Grindelwald and like Nazism.
Yeah.
There's a pretty clear correlation between the sign of the Deathly Hallows and then swastikas.
Yeah.
Because the Lovegoods seem to regard it as kind of a benevolent symbol.
Yeah, which the swastika historically, I think it was different, but it was mirror image, but it was like a Hindu symbol
and
that sort of thing.
Peace, I want to say,
something like that.
And of course, every time you try to have a conversation about swastikas, some asshat brings that up. Well, it's actually a Hindu peace symbol.
Yeah, some things have happened since then.
Yeah. But then Crumb interprets that symbol as being a very hateful symbol.
He sees it as a swastika, like a Nazi swastika.
So I thought that was an interesting way to like make that correlation.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's also the mention of Nurmengard.
Yeah.
Which Hermione says is a prison that Grindelwald built to hold his enemies.
It is very clearly a death camp.
Yeah, very clearly like
concentration camp.
I mean, Nurmengard, that's basically Nuremberg.
Yeah. Which was that a camp? No,
that was
the city where they had the trials.
Yes,
after.
That was the city where they had the trials.
But there's a bunch of camps that had similar names. It's very Germany.
It's very
Germanic sounding,
Nazi
sounding. Yeah. This isn't a plot hole. I thought it was. I brought this up. I wrote this note down.
I noticed it, and then I did a little bit of digging on it, and I was like, it's
a plot hole in the movie.
It feels plot holey,
well, it's not
but
in the movie,
it's not.
It kind of is, but it feels like a plot hole that you can easily explain away.
Yeah.
So in the book, again, the movie does this by not having Hermione say this in the cafe scene, but in the book, in the cafe scene where they obliviate the memory of the Death Eaters that attacked them, they say, Hermione, do it. And she goes, I've never done a memory charm before. I've never done before.
She says, I've never done a memory charm before, but I know the theory.
Right.
And then she does it.
But we have established earlier in the book that she changed the memory of her parents. And now the sort of kind of retconny answer to this is that she's never, quote unquote, obliviated somebody's memory before.
She did a different memory spell.
The idea
on her parents.
that she like implanted memories and changed the memories of her parents, similar to like maybe what Slughorn did with the memory that he kind of messed with in book 6. And so it's slightly different. And so when she says she's never done it before, she means she hasn't done this type of memory charm. Again, it feels a little bit like a plot hole. It's kind of like paving over.
It feels a little plot holy. I think when you have
not even plot holy, it's just like an oversight. It's not a plot hole, just as like an oversight by the author.
It's a continuity error.
Yes, a continuity error. A better way to,
and it, you can explain it away, but I think when you have to explain it away,
it's very clearly a
publication. That's pretty clearly a continuity error.
Yeah.
I had this thought partway through reading this book. I wonder why Dumbledore wasn't an animagus.
Yeah.
Because he was like super powerful and super good at transfiguration.
Yeah.
So you would think that would be something he would do.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, maybe he was, and we'll just never know because he didn't tell Harry jack shit.
It's true. Didn't tell him anything.
Yeah.
Ever.
So for all we know, he could have been an animagus.
Yeah. If he was, he would have been a phoenix. Maybe he was. Maybe the phoenix that came down into the Chamber of Secrets wasn't Fawkes. It was actually Dumbledore as an animagus.
Headcanon.
I mean, there's no reason for that because it could have just been Fawkes because clearly Fawkes also exists, but still. I mean, if he was going to be any animagus, he would be a phoenix, I feel like. Which, I don't know if you can be an animagus of a magical creature. We've never explored
I don't know.
that.
We don't have
just,
any precedent for
like,
that.
They're always Muggle creatures.
Yeah, just regular old animals.
Yeah. I saw this in I noticed this, and I almost made a note, but I didn't because I figured you'd catch it.
Yeah, there's a witch at the ministry named Wakanda.
Yep. Yep. That's just her name, Wakanda. There you go. That's it for general discussion of final verdict.
Should we have final verdicted on part 2?
We probably should.
Should we have waited?
We should wait. We'll wait. Part 1 of the book is better. I will say, I'll caveat this by saying this is up there with the closest adaptation.
Yeah, this is a strong adaptation.
Really strong. I think it captured, it lost a little bit of theme here and there with sort of the more important things about with the house elves specifically, which is really important. Which, again, the whole series has kind of lost that. But the characterizations are really strong. The scenes, a lot of them translate almost like one for one from the book, and it's just a really good adaptation. I'm not sure if it's as good for people who haven't read the book, but for having read the book, it's a very good adaptation.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, it's we'll withhold our verdict for part 2 technically, but it's gonna be the fucking same thing. So. That's going to do it for this episode of This Film is Lit. Hey, 3 hours. Perfect.
So join us next week.
Yes.
For our grand finale.
The grand finale of Harry Potter series. We're doing Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Until then, if you can send us a review, write us a review. Don't send it to us. We don't care. I mean, we do, but write it on the things. iTunes, Stitcher, anywhere you download a podcast, that would be fantastic. Also, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter. We have a subreddit, which I haven't posted in a while, but I will. What's the next thing we're doing after Harry Potter, just in case anybody doesn't care about Harry Potter? Why are you here still? But
after next week's episode on part 2, we are going to do our pre-Christmas episode.
And what's the Christmas episode? Do you know?
Well, I know both of them, but are you asking me what the pre-Christmas episode
is?
No,
yeah, what's the pre-Christmas episode?
The pre-Christmas episode is Night at the Museum.
Ah, there you go.
It snows in that movie.
It does, so it counts. So
it's
it counts.
Christmassy.
There you go. So Night at the Museum will be our one after we wrap up Harry Potter. So look forward to that if you're done with Harry Potter. I'm not. I've been loving it. But anyways, until then, guys, gals, not Ben, everybody else, keep reading books, keep watching movies, and keep being awesome.